Chapter 3055. Zi Chen stared coldly at the Ant King in the space with an indifferent expression. The Ant King's intelligent eyes met Zi Chen's and became very quiet. Just as Zi Chen felt that it was possible to subdue it, the Ant King suddenly opened its mouth. A straight beam of light flew out of its mouth, like a long sword, and headed straight for Zi Chen. Pa! The nomological laws that were originally guarding outside were immediately penetrated by the beam of light. The beam of light flew towards Zi Chen at an extremely fast speed, piercing through the afterimage he left behind. Zi Chen's figure appeared on the other side. His expression became increasingly cold. The Ant King turned around and glanced at him, but did not continue to attack. At that moment, Zi Chen's world opened and Su Mengyao walked in. She glanced at the Ant King and then sent a voice transmission to Zi Chen. Wei Li just said that these black ants are called the Dark Heavenly Ants. When they form a group, even the natives are afraid of them. In the past, the natives thought of many ways to subdue them, but none of them succeeded. Firstly, they couldn't find the Ant King. Secondly, they suspected that there was an Ant Queen behind the Ant King. Zi Chen's expression changed slightly when he heard Su Mingyao's voice transmission. In that case, subduing the Ant King was clearly not enough. They had to find the Ant Queen. No wonder it's unwilling to submit. Zi Chen glanced at the Ant King and stopped trying to recruit it. However, how was he going to find the Ant Queen? Zi Chen and Su Mengyao left this world. Appearing above the mineral vein, Zi Chen looked up at the black dots in the sky that had yet to disperse. A cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Those divine races looked at Zi Chen, their expressions incomparably agitated. So many black ants had not hurt their leader at all. They would naturally not be in danger if they followed such a leader from now on. Wei Li was not far away. Although he had arrived at Wang Yiping, he still had some trivial matters to deal with. Therefore, he did not go to the awakening altar to attempt a breakthrough. In addition to Wei Li, Zi Chen also saw other Protoss coming from the encampment. Clearly, they had all seen the signal. Originally, they had come to provide support. After hearing about the course of the battle, they were all incomparably shocked. At that moment, they were looking at leader Zi Chen with anticipation. They were all guessing if leader Zi Chen had managed to subdue the Dark Heavenly Ant. Go and take a look around! Zi Chen opened up his world and left with Su Mengyao and Wei Li. Tyrant and the rest continued to stay here. When Zi Chen returned to the main hall, Wei Li also walked in. At this moment, there were only the three of them. Wei Li, tell me more about the Dark Heavenly Ants, Zi Chen said to Wei Li. Wei Li smiled bitterly and said, I don't know much about the Dark Heavenly Ants. Everything I know is from hearsay. However, it is said that there is an Ant King among the Dark Heavenly Ants. Other than the Ant King, there is also an Ant Queen. It is said that there were natives who found the Ant King but were unable to subdue it. Therefore, they concluded that there is an Ant Queen. This possibility was extremely high. Zi Chen frowned and said, I also think that there might be an Ant Queen. However, where is the Ant Queen? Looking at the frowning Zi Chen, Wei Li said, Actually, we can use some methods to find the Ant Queen. What methods? Zi Chen asked. Wei Li said, Release the Dark Heavenly Ants and do something to them. When they return, follow their aura and search for it. When Zi Chen heard this, his eyes lit up. This method was obviously excellent. Wei Li bid farewell and left, leaving Zi Chen and Su Mengyao to discuss this matter. The Dark Heavenly Ants are extremely strong. If we can subdue them, our forces will expand instantly. Even if those natives start a war, we will have the power to resist, Su Mengyao said. Zi Chen nodded and said, Now, we have to think about how to find the Ant Queen. Su Mengyao said, Let Xiaoling search for it. She is very sensitive to aura. When Zi Chen was fighting a few years ago, the spirit-devouring king grass had devoured many natives. Now it had broken through to grade 2 and had grown 2 slender leaves. Apart from being extremely strong in combat, the spirit-devouring kinggrass also had an extremely strong defense. It was the best candidate to search for the Ant Queen. "All right, follow me." Zi Qin brought Su Mengyao to his world again. Then he used the power of law and separated 5 small spaces. In each space, there was a dark heavenly ant. Su Mengyao asked the grade 2 spirit-devouring kinggrass to leave a mark that only it could sense on the 5 dark heavenly ants. After arranging the marks, Zi Qin disappeared from the hall. He did not inform anyone and disappeared just like that. After a few teleportations, he arrived at the ore vein where the battle took place. Longhu, who was sitting cross-legged not far away, opened his eyes. When he saw Zi Qin, there was a flash of surprise in his eyes. Zi Qin's figure flashed again, and he was hundreds of miles away. Then he released the 5 dark heavenly ants and hid them in the space. After the 5 dark heavenly ants appeared, they began to run around like headless flies. This went on for about 10 minutes. They seemed to have identified the exact location and looked in a certain direction at the same time. At the next moment, their figures disappeared from the ground. They had entered the ground. In the hidden space, Zi Qin, who saw this, turned to look at Su Mengyao. Su Mengyao nodded and said, "I can sense that they are heading in a certain direction. The dark heavenly ants were moving underground. Let's go." Then, Su Mengyao guided Zi Qin's direction. Zi Qin hid in the space and moved forward. The dark heavenly ants were moving very fast underground. However, Zi Qin could not see them. Everything was within his senses. At this moment, Zi Qin was unable to determine whether this method was effective or not. When they left, the sky was dark. Now it was bright. According to the spirit-devouring kinggrass, the 5 black ants did not stop at all. They had a clear goal. Zi Qin did not tell the others that he left. However, since Longhu saw it, he believed that the others would know soon. Zi Qin's only hope was that there would not be any unexpected danger during this period. The speed of the 5 dark heavenly ants was extremely fast, but it took them half a month's time to travel. They stopped, Su Mengyao said. At this moment, Zi Qin looked ahead. There was a mountain range. The mountain range was empty. There was not a single dark heavenly ant. Could it be that this was the enemy's lair? "I can't see anything unusual," Zi Qin said. Su Mengyao said, "Xiao Ling said that they are underground. Moreover, they sense many auras." Zi Qin said, "Let Xiao Ling go down and take a look. Be careful." The spirit-devouring king grass turned into a ray of light and disappeared into the ground. Chapter 3056. On the surface, there was nothing unusual about this area. However, once one went deep underground, it was as if they had arrived at an extremely complicated maze. In this crisscrossing underground maze, there were dark heavenly ants shuttling back and forth. The spirit-devouring kinggrass's concealment technique was extremely advanced. The hard ground was nothing to it. Back then, it could silently sneak into the giant peak that gave birth to the mountain spirit. Even so, it took it a few days to reach the depths of this underground maze. Next, when it wanted to sneak into the queen ant's residence, it encountered some obstacles. Fortunately, the spirit-devouring king grass broke through 2 days later. As soon as it entered the space where the queen ant was, a ray of light shone down. The spirit-devouring king grass's figure appeared and was frozen by the light. Zi Qin and Su Mengyao, who had been waiting outside for a few days, quietly waited for news of the spirit-devouring king grass. According to Su Mengyao, everything was normal. There was no danger until the spirit-devouring kinggrass was about to sneak into the queen ant's territory. At this moment, Zi Qin had already arrived above the spirit-devouring kinggrass according to Su Mengyao's instructions. He was patiently waiting for news. "Oh no, Xiao Ling is trapped," Su Mengyao suddenly said with a nervous expression. Zi Qin began to mobilize the earth law in this world and was about to dive into the ground. "It's not here. Just a moment ago, Spirity seemed to have teleported. At that moment, Su Mengyao lost her perception of the spirit-devouring king grass. When she sensed its existence again, it was already hundreds of miles away. Zi Chen teleported there and mobilized the earth law to go deeper into the ground. He went deep for a long time. During this time, the earth law enveloped his body and allowed him to ignore his surroundings. However, he was not familiar with this law, so his speed was not fast. Just like that, as he went deeper and deeper, he found an independent space. This space was in a sealed state. Zi Chen's earth law could not pass through it. "Xiao Ling is in there," Su Mengyao said with certainty as she looked at the independent space. Zi Chen stretched out his palm and pressed on the space. In the next moment, the power of his thunder body erupted. With a rumble, the power of the thunder body dispersed in all directions. A hole was torn open in space, and Zi Chen and Su Mengyao entered it in a flash. As soon as he entered, Zi Chen saw many dark, heavenly ants. They were densely packed and appeared in this world. Because of his appearance, all the dark heavenly ants turned around and stared at him coldly. An extremely strong pressure was emitted from the dark heavenly ants. They are all at the second stage. Sensing the aura of the dark heavenly ants, Su Mengyao was a little surprised. "Go!" Zi Chen flew forward. He had already detected the spirit-devouring king grass and the ant queen with his spiritual senses. The ant emperor was in the center of this space. Its body was huge, and its aura was powerful. It looked somewhat similar to the mother nest, but its size was far smaller. The spirit-devouring king grass was suspended in the air, surrounded by a ray of light. It was unable to move. "Human, you have quite the guts." A cold voice sounded. It was the ant emperor. Since it could speak, it was naturally an intelligent creature. It was obviously much easier to deal with such an existence. Zi Chen came to the front of the ant emperor. He looked at it and said, "You are the ant emperor?" "According to what you humans call me, I am indeed the ant emperor and also the ant queen." The ant queen looked at Zi Chen and said, "You dare to come to me when you are only at the second stage? Have you thought about how you are going to die?" Zi Chen looked around and said, "If you are relying on them, then I'm sorry. They can't kill me. Is that so?" There was a hint of mockery in the ant queen's voice. Light surged around it, and more dark, heavenly ants appeared. These were all at the third stage of the king realm. Looking at the third stage of the king realm dark heavenly ants, Zi Chen shook his head again and said, "These won't do either." The space had not disappeared, and more dark heavenly ants walked out. After the third stage, there were fourth stage. 3 of them appeared in an instant. The powerful aura of the fourth stage caused Zi Chen's expression to change. Su Mengyao was also shocked. As expected, while Zi Chen's expression changed, his heart was also filled with excitement. "Now, are you going to die or not?" The ant queen said coldly. Zi Chen said, "I admit that you are very powerful. However, I am different from others. It is impossible for you to kill me with your advantage in numbers." The ant queen did not use all her strength to kill him immediately. Instead, she was talking to him here. This proved that there was still room for negotiation. The ant queen looked at him coldly, and killing intent surged in her eyes. Zi Chen opened up the world, and the dark heavenly ants appeared one after another. There was an unlimited number of them. Zi Chen even let out the ant king. Both sides would naturally communicate with each other. After all the dark heavenly ants were released, Zi Chen said with a smile, "Look, it is useless to me, no matter how many of them there are." The ant queen soon got the information from the ant king. She said, "You can imprison a group, but you can't imprison countless of them." Zi Chen said, "Why don't you try?" A fourth stage dark, heavenly ant walked out. Zi Chen opened up the world and it walked in. After entering, the dark heavenly ant began to devour the world. It did not seem like a terrifying confrontation, but it was a deadly confrontation. Once his world could no longer maintain the devouring, the dark heavenly ants would attack him as a group. At that time, he would naturally die. The fourth stage dark heavenly ant came into the world. Under the suppression of Zi-Chen's rule force, the fourth stage dark heavenly ant did not move at all. Next, Zi-Chen opened up the world. The fourth stage dark heavenly ant walked out and began to communicate with the ant queen. Zi-Chen continued, "My world can suppress the ants here. If there are more, it will be very difficult." The ant queen said, "I have a lot of similar dark heavenly ants here, so you still have to die." Zi-Chen said with a smile, "But I am only at the second stage. Moreover, I have been in this world for less than 10 years. So what?" The ant queen looked at him. "As long as I reach the third stage, I will not be afraid of you. Moreover, what I said earlier was just my conservative estimate. Even if you attack now, you will definitely not be able to kill me. Most importantly, I am the only one who can take you out of this world," Zi-Chen said as he looked at the ant queen. This was also the only reason why the ant queen was willing to talk to him. After all, Zi-Chen had encountered too many similar incidents. For example, the haze shadow in the Black Order battlefield. They could only stay in one place and could not leave. Back then, the leader of the Netherworld said that it was very difficult to nurture a fourth stage dark heavenly ant in a force. They would need to pay a huge price. However, there are actually 3 of them here with the ant queen. Perhaps there was a hidden fourth stage dark heavenly ant. This meant that it had been here for too long. Under such circumstances, Zi-Chan would be a fool if he still could not guess the other party's intentions. Chapter 3057. After Zi-Chen's world was recognized by the rules, he was able to display the strongest power of his current level in this world. However, only his world could be called a world. Everyone else's world was just a domain. This was because the spatial area was too lacking compared to Zi-Chen's world. This was also Zi-Chen's greatest reliance. He could take away all the dark heavenly ants. All these years, the queen ant had not left. Zi-Chen guessed that she could not bear to part with these dark heavenly ants. Or rather, she did not want to leave alone and lose everything. The queen ant remained silent after hearing Zi-Chen's words. Zi-Chen continued, "However, I have a condition. That is, you have to submit to me and listen to my commands." The silent queen ant said coldly, "Are you courting death?" Zi-Chen smiled faintly and said, "I've said it before. You can't kill me. Moreover, after I leave this time, I'll come again when I'm a rank 3. At that time, do you think you still have room to bargain with me?" A cold light flickered in the queen ant's eyes. Zi-Chen's expression did not change. He said again, "I don't lack powerhouses with potential. What I lack are ordinary subordinates. Now, I need time to pass because I have the awakening altar. In the future, there will be an endless stream of god tribe powerhouses." The queen ant had lived in this world for a long time. She must be very familiar with the god tribe. She might even be a witness when the awakening altar was destroyed. The awakening altar has been destroyed long ago. Human, don't try to lie to me. The queen ant's voice became even colder. Then how did we awaken? Zi-Chen said faintly, "I'm not afraid to tell you this secret. As long as the Son of God comes, the awakening altar will automatically appear. If you don't know what level the Son of God is, you only need to know that this place was created by the God tribe." The queen ant's cold gaze wavered at this moment. Her gaze wavered. Clearly, she was a little shaken. Zi-Chen continued, "If you can't accept submitting to me, we can cooperate temporarily." "How?" the queen ant asked. "Let me control these dark heavenly ants. I promise to bring all of you along when I go to the next level. When we reach the next level, I'll let you go at any time if you want to leave. Zi-Chin said. How can I trust you? The queen asked. There's nothing you can do about it. You can only choose to believe it or take a gamble. Because when that time comes, you will no longer be my opponent. You will be of little value to me, and you won't be able to threaten me. At that time, you can only trust my words. Zi-Chin said with a smile. Su Mengyao, who had been silent, said, We also have forces outside. Among them, there are many extremely special existences like you. To be able to gather them together, the character of the leader of the force is naturally not a problem. At the same time, the spirit-devouring kinggrass that was frozen in midair also released an aura fluctuation. The queen's expression changed even more. Zi-Chin looked at the queen ant and said, You've lived here for so many years. Don't you feel bored? Why not take a gamble? If you win, won't you be able to leave? Even if I lose, I'll just have to move to another place. Besides, my place isn't any smaller than this one. After a moment of silence, Zi-Chin waited patiently. In fact, there was no suspense in this matter because when the queen decided to let Zi-Chin show up, she had already made the decision to take a gamble when she said the first sentence. Okay, but I'll have to take a look first, the queen said in the end. Zi-Chin opened his world. A ray of light flew out of the queen ant's body. She still needed to make the final decision. She entered Zi-Chin's world. Zi-Chin did not use the rules of the world to trap the queen ant soul, nor did he isolate the world. The real world was displayed to her, and then she began to fly. During the flight, she saw many things that she had never seen before, the most common of which was vegetation. Compared to this barren world, Zi-Chin's world had a lot more vitality. Perhaps the spiritual power was not as dense as here, but the vitality was very rich, which made the queen ant feel very comfortable. Mountains, rivers, strange trees, strange fruits, and many strange little beasts. Although they were very weak, they were very novel to her. As she flew, she forgot about the time. When she woke up, a long time had passed. She released her aura fluctuation, and a ray of light appeared in front of her. She entered the light. Looking at the queen ant, whose eyes were glowing again, Zi-Chin said, The place you went is not even 1/1,000,000th of my world. The queen ant nodded and said, Okay, I'll believe you this time, but it's only a cooperation. It's impossible for me to submit. Okay, Zi-Chin nodded and said, Do you want to enter my world now, or do you want me to leave with the other dark heavenly ants? I'll go now. I've had enough of this place. The queen ant did not want to stay here a moment longer. Zi-Chin opened his world, and the queen ant's huge body flew into the world. At the same time, the other dark heavenly ants also flew into Zi-Chin's world. Looking at the dark heavenly ants that were continuously entering his world, Zi-Chin's eyes were filled with ecstasy. This time, it was simply an unexpected gain. With this, his last shortcoming in this world disappeared. He had an army that could go against the natives. The spirit-devouring king grass regained its freedom and flew to Su Mengyao, revolving around her. Su Mengyao extended her hand, and the spirit-devouring king grass flew into her palm. Su Mengyao smiled and said, It's all thanks to you this time. The spirit-devouring king grass's shining green leaves touched Su Mengyao's palm gently and disappeared in the next moment. The isolated space opened up, and more dark heavenly ants appeared. They were all in the realm of Wang Yiping, and each of them was led by the Ant King. Some of them are on their way back. Zi-Chin heard the queen ant's voice. Then Zi-Chin began to wait patiently. The dark heavenly ants that went out returned, and all of them entered Zi-Chin's world. In Zi-Chin's world, there was an army of dark heavenly ants, and there were a lot of them. Just like what he said earlier, after the dark heavenly ants entered his world, there were too many of them, and their aura was too strong. His world gradually reached its limit. As a result, his world could not be used for battle. Otherwise, the world would collapse. However, as long as he reached the 3rd grade, the quality of his world would be higher, and the world would be more stable. By then, this situation would naturally disappear. After collecting all the dark heavenly ants, Ziqin left the underground world and teleported back to the ancient realm. When he came, he was not fast. When he returned, he teleported all the way back. Chapter 3058. Ziqin looked at the encampment below with a shocked expression on his face. Was this his nightmare force? The place was in ruins. The palace he lived in was gone, and so were the buildings left by Kaima. How did this happen? Seeing everything below, Su Mengyao was slightly stunned. It must be the aboriginals. Ziqin's expression turned cold. There was violence in his eyes. The encampment was in trouble. What about the others? Was everyone safe? A divine race warrior appeared in the distance. He saw Ziqin and shouted in surprise, "Leader!" Ziqin turned around and looked at the Wang Yiping divine race warrior. He asked, "What happened here?" 2 4th-rank kings and some 3rd-rank kings came. They seemed to be looking for something and then destroyed the encampment, said the divine race warrior. Did anyone get hurt? Asked Ziqin. His expression grew colder. Yes, a lot of casualties. The divine race warrior said they didn't find what they were looking for after coming here, so they started killing. Lord Kaima is dead, and Lord Weili is captured. At this moment, more divine race warriors flew toward them. Apparently, they were other members of the force. Ziqin saw Lin Shui in the crowd. Her aura was weak. Apparently, she was injured. Shui Lin flew over and said, "There's a traitor in the force. He's one of Kaima's most trusted subordinates. He accidentally mentioned that you might not be in the force anymore, and the traitor told the natives." "Where is he?" asked Ziqin. "He was taken away by the aboriginals." Lin Shui said, "When they came, we felt something was wrong and started retreating. We were surrounded by those 3rd-rank kings. We killed our way out. Then I told Long Hu and the others to leave. Then I told the people in the mine not to resist. They destroyed the 3rd mine, but they didn't hurt the foundation." "How long has it been?" asked Ziqin. 10 days. Now, Wesley is in their hands because the traitor told me that Wesley has a very good relationship with you. Ziqin nodded. Of course, he was enraged when there were casualties. However, the only thing that made him feel lucky was that Lin Shui and the others who had followed him from the Life Star were not injured. Otherwise, he would have to blame himself. As for the captured Wei, Li, they naturally had to save him. "How was your harvest?" Shui Lin asked. She naturally knew what the two were doing. Ziqin nodded, which made Shui Lin very happy. Schwa. In the next moment, Ziqin disappeared. Su Mengyao looked at the other Protoss around her and said, "Next, we will rebuild our base. As for what happened this time, we will seek justice for everyone and for our fallen comrades. We will also rescue Wesley. If the base is destroyed, we can rebuild it. As long as everyone is safe, it will be fine. If the enemy comes again while we are away, don't resist. Wait for us to come back." Hearing Su Mingyao's words, the group of God Race members was very touched. Ziqin came to the world and stood in front of the Queen Ant. His eyes were filled with anger. At this moment, the Queen Ant was looking at beautiful scenery that she had never seen before. She was trying to eat some spirit flowers. Everything was so strange. Sensing Ziqin's anger, the Queen Ant asked, "What happened?" "My base was attacked by the natives. They must have come to find the awakening altar," Ziqin said. "Has the altar been found?" the Queen Ant asked. Ziqin shook his head. "Then why did you come to me?" The Queen Ant looked at Ziqin. "I want to borrow your men to fight," Ziqin said seriously. "It is a real fight, not a deterrent. I don't have enough people. Those God Race members haven't really awakened yet. They can't join the fight." "Okay," the Queen Ant answered without hesitation. This was out of Ziqin's expectation. He looked at her in surprise. The Queen Ant said, but I have a condition." "What condition?" Zichen asked. "You have to promise to kill as many natives as you can. The more, the better." The queen ant's voice had a hint of a smile. "It would be even better if you could kill all of them. The corpses must be dealt with by us." The queen ant's request surprised Zichen. She wasn't worried about the dark heavenly ants' lives. However, he could vaguely guess why she had such a request. It was obvious that the dark heavenly ants needed to be devoured like the spirit devouring king grass if they wanted to grow quickly. It was also understandable why the dark heavenly ants would go out to destroy the forces created by the god race every once in a while. "Okay," Zichen nodded. His goal was to have a place in this world where he could survive and develop. The corpses of the natives were useless to him. You can't command the other heavenly ants. You don't have to command them. You just have to command the leader. The leader that the queen ant mentioned was naturally the ant king in this world. When Zichen reappeared, the god race who had returned had already started to rebuild this place. Some of them died in the battle. Some of them left directly after they left to seek refuge with other forces, Lin Shui said. "That's good too." Zichen nodded and said, "Next, let them break through first. The forces won't recruit any more people." Not long after, Tyrant and the others returned after hearing the news. They had left this place for the past few days as they were worried that the rank 4 true gods would come again. After all, they were only rank 2 true gods. They couldn't fight against rank 4 true gods. "What should we do now?" Tyrant asked as soon as he returned. "I'll go and find out who did it." "We'll go to war next," Zichen said. Tyrant's eyes lit up and he said, "You've succeeded?" Zichen nodded. "Yes, I've succeeded. Now, I have an army that can start a war." After leaving Su Mengyao, Lin Shui, and the others to hold the fort, Zichen led Tyrant and the other powerful warlords to the forces of the underworld. Under the circumstance that Zichen didn't know anyone, the only way for him to get information was to go to the forces of the underworld. When they arrived at the forces of the underworld again, everyone recognized Zichen instantly. Since he came to this world, he had been bringing great shock to this world. Each time, the shock was stronger than the last. The news about Zichen's rank 2 true gods fighting against rank 4 true gods had already spread. Although Zichen was only rank 2 true gods, his combat strength was comparable to rank 4 true gods. When Zichen saw the leader of the underworld, he said directly, "This time, I'm here to ask you if you know which family destroyed my forces." "It's the Perry family," the leader of the underworld said. "The one who besieged you last time was Paramello from the Perry family. The rank 4 true gods you fought also came from the Perry family. His name is Perimbalai." Chapter 3059. The Aboriginals are not as united as you think. They are wary of each other and are worried that they will be plotted against. Therefore, many of them do not agree to take action against you. This was an important piece of information that the Netherworld chief told Zichen. It also meant that if Zichen attacked the Perry clan now, he would not be besieged like last time. In fact, there would even be people who would help him. The rules of this world only protect those below the 3rd rank. Once they reach the 4th rank and do not leave, the rules will suppress them. They will be greatly exhausted and recover very slowly. Therefore, they will not take action normally. This was the information that the Netherworld chief told Zichen last time. This time, the Netherworld chief mentioned it again. Zichen said, "If the 2 of us continued to fight like last time, would he be exhausted in the end?" The Netherworld chief said, "If he uses his full strength, he will be exhausted very quickly, as long as you can withstand his storm-like attacks." Zichen nodded and did not say anything. "What do you plan to do next?" the Netherworld chief asked. "My people are still detained by them. There will be a battle soon," Zichen said indifferently. "Do you need my help?" "I want to know where the Perry clan is located." The Netherworld chief took out a jade slip with a map and said, "The Perry clan's location and some of their properties are marked on it." Obviously, the Netherworld chief had already guessed that Zi-chan would come and had made preparations. Of course, it was more likely that this was the doing of the Aboriginals who supported the Netherworld. Perhaps they wanted to use Zi-chan to play a game. Zi-chan did not care about this because he had achieved his goal. That was all. Using his spiritual sense to explore the jade slip, Zi-chan saw the full picture of the map. This was his first time seeing this world. In the center of the map, there was a city called Sky Domain City. There were 5 cities in the periphery of Sky Domain City. These 5 cities were like guards that surrounded and protected Sky Domain City. Other than these 5 cities, there were more than 10 other cities. In addition to these cities, there were also the native forces. They had their own residences in the cities, but outside the cities, they had their own forces. Those forces were the headquarters. At this moment, Zi-chan looked at the markings on the map and saw the Perry family's base and properties. Among them, there were hunting grounds and mineral veins. "I think you should go to those crystal lodes." Unlike the crystal lodes controlled by the God clan, the crystal lodes controlled by the Perry family can produce complete superm crystal. Not only them, but all the crystal lodes controlled by the natives are of high quality. In these mines, there are natives personally overseeing them to prevent the miners from embezzling. The Netherworld chief said. Zi-chan got the information he wanted, so he took his leave. At this moment, he was preparing to head to Perry faction. On the way, he happened to pass by a mineral vein that belonged to Perry faction. It was a good opportunity to take a look. Zi-chan's sudden arrival did not attract much attention. A rank 2 king was nothing here. Zi-chan stood in the air above the mineral vein and looked around. From the outside, the mineral vein was not big. However, since it could produce real superm crystal, it obviously indicated that the mineral vein was of high quality. "Who are you?" At this moment, a God clan member noticed him and raised his head to shout at him. Therefore, more God clan members noticed his presence. The number of people in this mineral vein was fixed. Zi-chan was a stranger. A native guarding the mineral vein walked out. He was only Wang Yiping, but when he looked at Zi-chan, who was a rank 2 king, his eyes were full of coldness. "How dare you come here? Do you want to die? Are you in charge here?" Zi-chan looked at the native and asked. "You want to die?" Zi-chan's attitude made the native furious. He immediately flew toward Zi-chan. His body flashed with murderous intent. Obviously, he wanted to kill someone. This was the native's attitude toward God clan members. They would kill if they did not agree with them. It was the same attitude toward slaves. The other God clan members were used to this. They even stared coldly at Zi-chan because he was an outsider. They already had a strong sense of territory. As for their racial consciousness, it was very vague. The other natives guarding the area watched this scene silently with a mocking look on their faces. Puff! Before the native who rushed in front of Zi-chan could launch a powerful attack, a ray of light appeared from the void and penetrated his body. It was a leaf that shone with a green light. Feeling the native's life force constantly draining away, the God clan miners' faces changed drastically. Their faces were full of horror. "Kill him!" The native who were watching the battle also changed their expressions. They flew toward the sky, their powerful aura surging. A sheathed long saber appeared in Zi-chan's hand. He glanced around indifferently. The next moment, the long saber was unsheathed. A shining saber arc slashed in all directions, passing through the bodies of the natives who rushed forward. The next moment, the bodies of these natives were divided into 2. The light of the rules that appeared during this time did not protect them. In an instant, these natives were all dead. Their bodies did not fall to the ground. They were penetrated by the previous green light and then swallowed. There were exclamations and sounds of horror all around. Zi-chan ignored these miners and turned his head to look at a building. A person walked out from there. He was a 3rd-grade king and was also the strongest person guarding this place. He had seen the previous scene and was extremely shocked. Now that his eyes met Zichen's, he involuntarily said, "You are Zichen?" In today's world, who did not know Zichen's name? The miners were also shocked. They had heard that Zichen was the most powerful god clan at present. He ran away from the natives after being besieged for several years. Could it be that he had awakened his power and returned? Although they had long recognized the Perry family, they still looked at Zichen with anticipation. Zichen looked at Wang Sanpin. His eyes flashed coldly and he swooped down. Wang Sanpin shouted angrily. The aura of a third-grade god clan suddenly erupted. A life weapon appeared in his hand. Zichen, who was rushing forward, unsheathed his saber. The shining saber light, with a heavy aura, passed through the third-grade god clan's body. The weapon in the third-grade god clan's hand shattered instantly, turning into energy and dissipating. The third-grade god clan's body froze. He looked down at himself. A bloodline appeared on his body. The bloodline separated his body. Chapter 3060. Due to the suppression of the rules, under normal circumstances, only King Grade 3 Netherworld had the ability to kill Wang EP natives. Now, Zichen, a second-rank king, had actually killed a third-rank king native in an instant. His battle prowess was much stronger than those of the Netherworld race, and even stronger than the natives. Was this their power after they awakened? All the Protoss miners were shocked. They were all Wang Epin's realm. Obviously, the Perry organization also had requirements for the miners' realm. When they heard Zichen's words, they woke up from their shock. They reluctantly gave all the Supreme Crystal they had mined this time to Zichen. Zichen didn't leave some for them because of their kindness. This would only make them die faster. After taking the resources, Zichen turned and left. "My lord, will you destroy the Perry organization?" A voice suddenly sounded. Everyone looked at Zichen, who was in the air, with anticipation in their eyes. Zichen stopped but didn't turn around. He said, "I should." There was an uproar. Zichen disappeared. After leaving the mineral vein, Zichen flew in the direction of the Perry family. He didn't choose to teleport because there had to be a battle before he could mobilize the dark, heavenly ants. Therefore, he needed a battle this time. As for the scale, it was fine as long as it wasn't weaker than the previous time. Under the circumstances where he deliberately left some time, the Perry family received the news that Zichen had returned and that the mineral vein had been robbed. In an instant, the entire Perry family was furious. Perry Billy, who had captured Wesley, said angrily, "This is too much. We need a battle." Paramello, who was standing at the side, smiled bitterly. This ancestor had captured a person to threaten Zichen, but this was clearly a wrong move. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have searched for the awakening altar. In the end, he didn't find the awakening altar, and this happened. However, it was obviously impossible for the Perry family to send someone back just like that. They couldn't afford to lose face. This war was about to break out. But before that, the Perry family had to find some allies. Although the Perry clan was not a royal soldier clan, its own influence was enormous. There were many subordinate clans. Facing such a situation, these subordinate clans naturally had to send people out. While Zichen was still on his way, enough natives had gathered outside the Perry family. These natives were enough to start a war. Zichen raised his head and looked at the sky. There were many black dots moving with him. Since he didn't use teleportation, he was under full surveillance. Should we go up and shoot them down? At this moment, except for Su Mengyao and a few girls who stayed in the encampment, everyone else followed Zichen here and didn't try to hide. No need. Through the Netherworld chieftain, Zichen learned everything about the natives. Not only were they not united, but they were also at odds with each other. For example, this matter this time, who knew how many forces were eyeing it, wanting to get a share of the pie. We're here. At the end of the line of sight, a city appeared. This was a private city, completely under the control of the Perry clan. This was the foundation of the Perry clan. As long as this city was taken down, the Perry clan would naturally be destroyed. When Zichen and the others arrived, the closed city gates suddenly opened and the natives walked out. One after another, in groups of 3 to 5, a large group. The natives, who were enough to form an army, gathered outside the city. They didn't stand in an orderly manner because they were all powerful beings and didn't need to form a military formation to attack. Paramello, who was at the second grade king realm, stood at the forefront. Zichen led the others forward and stopped after a distance. He looked at Paramello and said, "We meet again." Paramello said, "Yes, are you here to surrender this time?" "Surrender?" Zichen looked at him. Paramello waved his hand, and Wei Li was brought over from the back of the crowd. He was in good condition. When he saw Zichen, he smiled bitterly. "He's in my hands. If you want him to live, I'll give you a chance. Surrender to the Perry clan and then submit to us. Otherwise, before we start the war, he'll be the sacrificial victim for our victory," Paramello said calmly. When Wei Li heard this, his smile became even more bitter. Zichen said indifferently, "Can you be any more shameless?" "What do you mean by shameless? On this battlefield, in order to win, we'll do anything," Paramello said solemnly. "This is your only chance to save him." Looking at Zichen, who was still frowning, Paramello said, "Don't tell me you haven't considered saving him. I heard he's your friend. If you don't care about the life and death of your friend, I believe no one will follow you in the future." Zichen said with a smile, "It seems that it was a mistake for me not to capture a rank 3 on my way here." Paramello smiled. Only Zichen understood the meaning of his smile. It was useless even if he captured a rank 3. On the battlefield he would do anything. Either you surrender and submit, he lives and you live, or you choose to fight, he dies, and in the end you will also die. Paramello said indifferently, "Before coming here, I already had a deep understanding of you. There are only a few dozen of you. Even if all of you attacked, you wouldn't be able to do anything to the Perry clan. As for your awakening altar, although I didn't find it last time, I also know very well that you will need a very long time to gather an army that can be used in battle. You've only been here for a few years, but the Perry clan has been here for who knows how many tens of thousands of years. How can a small team of 20 or so people like you be able to shake us? That's why submitting is your best choice, because this way you can also obtain the greatest amount of resources and benefits from us." Zichen looked at Paramello and said, "Are you done?" "Yes." Paramello quietly waited for Zichen's reply. Zichen turned his head to look at Wei Li. Wei Li raised his head to look at Zichen and said with a bitter smile, "This is indeed a problem." The next moment he soared into the sky. Seeing this scene, Paramello smiled faintly and said, "A mere rank 1. Do you think he can—" Before he could finish his words, his expression changed. At the same time, the expressions of the natives who rushed forward also changed greatly. This was because Wei Li, who had soared into the sky, did not choose to escape. Instead, he chose to be annihilated. His soul was instantly annihilated. His body was also scattered, turning into a rain of blood that fell from the sky. Chapter 3061. No one had expected Wei Li to end his own life without hesitation. Not only had Paramello not expected this, but even Tyrant and the others were dumbfounded. Everyone was stunned. Looking at the rain of blood in the sky, their expressions were extremely complicated. Zichen looked at Paramello in front of him and said indifferently, "You shouldn't have used my friend's life to threaten me, and you shouldn't have provoked me. We just want to survive here. We never thought of dominating. But now I've changed my mind." Paramello looked at Zichen, whose expression was getting colder and colder, and suddenly realized that everything had become out of his control. In the depths of his heart, he faintly felt that he had made a mistake, and this mistake might have unimaginable consequences. However, looking at the current situation, even without Wei Li, they still had a great chance of winning. This was because the number of opponents added up to less than 20, and they had formed an army. He forcibly expelled the emotions in his mind and said loudly, "Then let me see what you're capable of." Paramello waved his hand again. The natives behind him dispersed, and the Protoss walked out from behind. The weakest of the Protoss was rank 1, and there were many rank 2 among them. "Go and kill them," Paramello said coldly. "This damn guy is really shameless." Tyrant said angrily as he looked at the Protoss rushing forward. Zichen took a step forward and released a powerful aura. He looked at the approaching Protoss and said, "You have no ties in this world, so there's no need for you to risk your lives for them. If you leave now, I'll take it that you're being forced. On the other hand, if you persist, then you can only be wiped out." The charging Protoss hesitated. They had naturally heard of Zichen's deeds. He was an existence that even the natives were very wary of. "Believe me, if you want to leave, no one can stop you, because I will eventually destroy Paramello's forces. After this, they won't have time to fend for themselves." As soon as these words came out, the natives' expressions turned ugly. However, it was not because of fear, but because of anger. In their opinion, Zichen, with only a few dozen people, dared to threaten to destroy Perry's forces. It was too boastful. Don't listen to him. If we kill him, we'll have unlimited resources to use. We'll be able to reach the 3rd rank and leave this world. The voice of a god came from the crowd. When the other hesitant Protoss heard this, their hesitant expressions became resolute, and they all rushed forward. The natives at the back looked at this scene with ridicule. Since they wanted to fight, then let them fight among themselves first. Zichen shook his head as he watched the divine race charge forward. His expression turned cold once more. He was not related to these Protoss, so he had already done his best to remind them. Since they were so stubborn, he would not be polite. He waved his hand, and a space opened up. The dark heavenly ants gushed out like a torrential flood. After the black mass of heavenly ants appeared, they hid in the ground and disappeared without a trace. Such a scene caused everyone's expression to change drastically. Those Shin clan members who were charging forward also stopped in their tracks. They were extremely terrified. "It's the dark heavenly ants." Paramello, who had just regained his composure, had a drastic change in expression as he looked ahead in shock. At the same time, the masters of the forces who saw everything through the spiritual eagle exclaimed in shock. They would never have thought that Zichen could really control the dark heavenly ants. In that case, who would be a match for him? A sense of panic began to spread among these forces and families. Zichen did not know how much shock he had brought to the world. At the moment, he had only sent out a troop of dark heavenly ants, which was controlled by an ant king. After they dived into the ground, they quickly attacked according to the ant king's instructions. In the next moment, they reappeared and attacked the divine race. At the same time, there were some dark heavenly ants that charged toward Paramello. "Don't kill us. We surrender. We surrender." To the divine race, the dark heavenly ants charging forward was a massacre. Hence, they cried out to surrender. Zichen stood there with an indifferent expression. He did not give any other orders. Since these people wanted to kill him to exchange for resources, Zichen, who had given them a chance, would definitely not give them a second chance. This was also a form of deterrence. He believed that no other divine race would continue to work for Paramello in the future. Shrill cries of the divine race could be heard from the front. Paramello's expression turned extremely ugly. Things had once again exceeded his expectations. Behind him, the natives' faces were extremely pale. However, they had not reached the point of extreme fear. Although there were many dark heavenly ants, they were not lacking in numbers either. It was not that they did not have the strength to fight. "Kill!" Paramello took a deep breath and swung his hand down like a blade. Meanwhile, the aboriginals at the rear charged forward. This was the first time in history that the natives and the dark heavenly ants engaged in a large-scale battle. When the battle broke out, powerful energy surged. Zi-Chin stood at the back like a commander-in-chief. He did not take any action. Tyrant rushed forward impatiently. He needed this battle very much. The others did not move. All of them stood beside Zi-Chin and looked at the battle ahead. Wang Yiping's divine race had no room to resist the dark heavenly ants. They could only be slaughtered. As for the rank second kings, they could barely resist the dark heavenly ants. However, they could only be pushed back or sent flying. It was impossible for them to kill the dark heavenly ants. Wang Yiping was killed very quickly. The rank second kings ran far away. If they could run away, Zi-Chin would not stop them. On the other hand, if they died, Zi-Chin would not care either. These natives are indeed powerful. Zhang Haoyan looked ahead coldly. When the dark heavenly ants encountered the natives, they did not have the absolute upper hand. Both parties were evenly matched. Zi-Chin passed down a new order. The dark heavenly ants that were fighting the divine race turned around and charged towards the natives. The divine race were freed. Hence, they left the battlefield without hesitation and ran far away. At this moment, they no longer had any thoughts of killing Zi-Chin. Even with the addition of many dark heavenly ants, Zi-Chin's side did not have an overwhelming advantage. When the battle was in a stalemate, Paramello said indifferently, "Catch the ringleader first." Wang Sanpin, who had not appeared behind Paramello, immediately flew forward. At the same time, the rank 4 king, Paramello, who had fought with Zi-Chin before, flew out from the city and headed towards them. "Do it!" Zi-Chin shouted. His body soared into the sky and charged towards Paramello. Chapter 3062. Boom! In the sky, Zi-Chin and Parabili exchanged blows. A powerful ripple spread out. Both of them retreated. Zi-Chin, who had stabilized his body, left behind a few streaks of golden light on the spot before he disappeared again. In the next moment, he appeared beside Parabili and threw out a punch. Lightning flashed. This punch contained a powerful offensive power. The energy rumbled and powerful shock waves spread out. Both of them retreated again. After knowing the weakness of a grade 4, Zi-Chin did not expect to kill the enemy immediately. He only hoped to exhaust the enemy as much as possible. In the other battles, Zhang Haotian and the rest were able to fight evenly with the enemy. They were not in any danger for the time being. After the two of them exchanged more than 10 blows, the intense battle below suddenly stopped. The dark heavenly ants that were in the middle of the battle actually hid underground and disappeared. Zi-Chin's face revealed a look of astonishment. The natives who had lost their opponents raised their heads and looked at Zi-Chin. At this moment, they were the only enemies left on the battlefield. "Retreat!" Zi-Chin shouted and retreated quickly. At the same time, Tyrant and the rest also retreated from the battlefield. The first battle ended with the disappearance of the dark heavenly ants and Zi-Chin retreating. "Don't chase. Be careful. It might be a trap." Parabili stood in the sky and said indifferently as he looked at Zi-Chin and the rest flying away. Although he had only exchanged more than 10 blows with Zi-Chin, he had consumed a lot of energy. The battle had ended. However, there was nothing to clean up on the battlefield because the corpses on the ground had already disappeared. Occasionally, there would be a few spatial spirit rings scattered on the ground. Those were the ones that the dark heavenly ants could not devour in time. They had won the battle this time. Hence, cheers could be heard everywhere. The nervousness they had for the dark heavenly ants also disappeared this time. These dark heavenly ants were just SOO. Zi-Chin and the others flew off into the distance, retreating for hundreds of miles. Zi-Chin stopped on a spacious plain. What's wrong with those dark heavenly ants? Why did they stop fighting? Tyrant asked in surprise. Zichen smiled and did not explain for the monk. The dark heavenly ants that had disappeared earlier appeared beside Zichen again. After that, Zichen opened his world and they all entered it. Since it was the first battle, he naturally had to give the Perry family some hope. If the first battle was so easy to destroy them, then how could he continue the long battle? Everyone rest here first. We'll continue fighting in a few days. Zichen entered the world and signaled for the dark heavenly ants to retreat. On one hand, he didn't want to kill them all. On the other hand, the dark heavenly ants had devoured enough energy. They needed to bring the energy back. When Zichen arrived at the world, a ball of light floated in front of him. Within the ball of light there was a soul. More than 10 pieces of superm crystal flew towards Zichen and exploded, turning into pure energy that converged towards his soul. The soul that had absorbed the superm crystal began to expand. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a person. It was Wei Li. Although Zichen and Wei Li hadn't known each other for a long time, he definitely couldn't watch him die. Before this, the two of them had already communicated. Wei Li disintegrated his body and left behind a soul. Zichen took away this soul to help Wei Li revive. After all, Wei Li killed himself and wasn't killed. He secretly left behind a soul that no one could detect. How do you feel? Zichen looked at the revived Wei Li and asked, I'm just a little weak. Wei Li sensed his body and said with a smile, the laws contained in these superm crystal are very pure. After I recover, my cultivation might even improve. There's a superm crystal here. You can use it to recover. Zichen waved his hand and more than 10 pieces of superm crystal flew over. That's too much. 2 pieces are enough. Wei Li took 2 pieces of superm crystal and said, what do you plan to do next? Annihilate Perry's faction, Zichen said. Just as Wei Li was about to say something, he saw the dark heavenly ants. Hence, he was extremely shocked. After nodding his head, he didn't say anything else. With these dark heavenly ants, annihilating Perry's faction wasn't a problem. Zichen didn't need to rest. Neither did Tyrant and the dark heavenly ants. However, his enemies needed to rest. Hence, Zichen deliberately gave them some time. Perry's faction won the battle. However, Paramello wasn't happy at all. This was because Zichen's faction didn't suffer any losses. The ones that died were just some dark heavenly ants. Moreover, he could control the dark heavenly ants. This was naturally a big deal. In his heart, he felt that this victory was a little strange. It didn't seem normal. Sky Region City was the core city of this world. All the royal factions and various reputable factions had their strongholds here. If they wanted to enter the next level, they would have to pass through here. After the battle, the people from Perry's faction came to Sky Region City. They gathered the family heads of various factions to discuss the invasion of the dark heavenly ants. In this world, the Aborigines didn't have a common enemy. However, in terms of threat, the dark heavenly ants were one. This was because they were numerous. Once they unleashed their power, it would be extremely dangerous. This time, the participation of the dark heavenly ants in the battle naturally shocked many people. This was because they were in existence that posed a threat to all the Aborigines. All the major factions gathered together to discuss how to deal with the dark heavenly ants. This time, the dark heavenly ants came with great momentum. If we don't get rid of them as soon as possible, they will definitely pose a great threat to us. The representative of Perry's Royal Third Grade said in a deep voice. The representatives of the other factions remained silent. They didn't express their opinions. In the past, the dark heavenly ants didn't interfere with our affairs. However, this time they're helping a divine clan. I think the Ant Queen wants to borrow the hand of the divine clan to annihilate us. The representative of Perry's family said again, the scene of the battle is too terrifying. Someone smiled when he heard it. However, he still didn't say anything. At this time, we have to unite and deal with the dark heavenly ants with all our might. No matter how the representative of Perry's family said, no one expressed their opinions. The reason was that the few royal factions didn't express their opinions. For example, the Craftsman King family, Kong family remained silent. Since the royal factions didn't say anything, the other families naturally didn't have anything to say. Hence, they remained silent. This became the Perry family's one-man show. After they finished talking non-stop, everyone dispersed. None of the families expressed their opinions. Obviously, they weren't fools. Naturally, they knew what was happening in the outside world. If the dark heavenly ants really came to deal with the Aborigines, all the factions would have to take action. However, this time, the dark heavenly ants were controlled by someone. It wasn't a real disaster. Hence, they naturally wouldn't take action. Chapter 3063. All the forces were clear about Perry family's wishful thinking. They wanted to make use of the dark heavenly ants to gather a group of people to fight. However, no force would take action at this time. No one was willing to be used as a tool by Perry family. It could be said that Perry family was the first to take action in this matter. They would not care how Zi Chen dealt with Perry family. What they cared about was what would happen in the future. If Perry family won, this matter would naturally be left unsettled. On the other hand, if Zichen won and continued to attack other forces, he would face the cooperation of all the Aborigines. At that time, it would be a real war. The representative of Perry family immediately sent the news back. The master of Perry family was naturally furious when he heard the news. All the forces had discussed and agreed to send Paramello the last time. This time, when danger came, no one was willing to take action. We can only fight, Paramello said. This is also an opportunity for us. As long as we obtain the final victory, no one will dare to touch us even if we suffer a great loss. Moreover, we can make use of this opportunity to recruit some small forces and cultivate an army that is good at fighting. In the current situation, this was the only way for Perry family. In this battle, it was impossible for them to seek peace with Zichen. They would either destroy him or recruit him. The latter was obviously impossible. Then the former was the next step. The spiritual eagle was flying in the sky, investigating everything below. Zichen's team was resting. There were only about 20 of them. The dark heavenly ants had returned to his world. 3 days later, Zichen's team set off again. They went straight to the city where Perry family was located. Outside the city, an army of Aborigines appeared again. During this period, a team of God Clan appeared. However, this time, the number of God Clan members was very small. Their realms were very high. They were all grade 2. Both parties naturally wouldn't have too much conversation. Zi Chen immediately released the dark heavenly ants. After these dark heavenly ants appeared, they disappeared into the ground. Moments later, they reappeared in front of them and started attacking the natives. Beside, Zi Chen, Tyrant, and the others also rushed forward. Zi Chen did not make a move. Right now, he was already capable of dealing with a rank 4. That was why he would take the initiative to attack only when a rank 4 made a move. The battle lasted for 2 hours and ended with the dark heavenly ant retreating. The enemy didn't continue to chase after it. It was as though both parties had discussed it beforehand. They stopped when the time was right. After the battle, the Perry family began to recruit some elites in other cities. During this period, they gave them a generous reward. At the same time, they also began to recruit those Protoss who were rank 2 and above. The other forces had been quietly observing the situation. Through the Spirit Eagle's attention, they were probing Zi Chen's situation and the strength of the dark heavenly ant. In the next few battles, they calculated that the dark heavenly ant's battle would only last for 2 hours. Furthermore, the number of dark heavenly ants on Zi Chen's side was decreasing. After discovering this detail, some forces heaved a sigh of relief. Clearly, As long as Perry's forces put in more effort, Zi-Chen's dark heavenly ants would be completely annihilated. Not sure if it was because they had seen the light at the end of the tunnel. There were actually many small forces showing up these days, expressing their desire to join Perry's forces and participate in the battle. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. In this 1 month, Perry's forces had suffered a great loss. Naturally, the dark heavenly ants had also suffered a great loss. In the living room, the members of the Perry family gathered together for a discussion. Paramello said, "According to the clues that we currently have, the dark heavenly ants are unable to fight for a long time. At most, they can only fight for 2 hours. After 2 hours, we can't be sure if they still have other combat powers." This was the experience that they had summed up after a month of battles. Paramello, who had not made a move since the first battle, said, "If we can come to a conclusion, then we'll go all out and kill Zi-Chen in one fell swoop." The Perry family had reached the most critical moment. A rank for could make a move. At the same time, they had allied forces and could also mobilize a few rank for experts. Under such circumstances, killing Zi-Chen shouldn't be a problem. The next step was to verify what was going on with the dark heavenly ants that Zi-Chan was controlling and whether their combat powers could only last for 2 hours. When the two sides started fighting, the news about the battle had already spread in this area. Many deity tribe forces were aware of it. During this period, many deity tribe members had specially come to this area to watch the battle. However, when they saw that Zi-Chen only had over 20 people, they inevitably felt disappointed. How could such a small number of people start a battle? However, after the battle broke out, they were completely stunned when they saw the dark heavenly ants. After that, they became extremely excited. This was because the deity tribe that had been oppressed for a long time was finally going to stand up at this moment. Looking at the natives dying one by one in the hands of the dark heavenly ants, they were extremely excited. After that, there were many more spectators at the periphery. They were deity tribe members from various forces. As the battle continued, they naturally heard a lot of gossip. For example, the expert who was controlling the dark heavenly ants to fight the natives had his own force. The force was called Nightmare Force. During this period, many people wanted to join Nightmare Force. However, it was a pity that Nightmare Force was no longer recruiting. This made many deity tribe members feel regretful. This was because they already knew that there was an awakening altar in Nightmare Force. Those deity tribe members who had left Nightmare Force because of the previous crisis felt extremely regretful. This was because they had missed an opportunity. Moreover, they didn't expect leader Zi-Chen to be able to subdue the dark heavenly ants to participate in the battle. In that case, who among the natives would be his match? The only thing that comforted them was that there weren't many dark heavenly ants. If the Perry family worked hard, they would still be able to exterminate them. Therefore, Zi-Chen couldn't be said to have a firm foothold in this area at the moment. In the blink of an eye, another month had passed. During this period, the dark heavenly ants had lost many of their numbers. However, their gains were even greater. This was because the natives that they had devoured had mastered the power of rules. Devouring one was more effective than devouring hundreds of deity tribe members. The rules that were extracted by the dark heavenly ants were all used by the queen ant to nurture other dark heavenly ants. Chapter 3064. On the battlefield, Zi-Chen looked ahead indifferently. Ever since he encountered the rank 4 in the first battle, the rank 4 had not appeared in the subsequent battles. He had not taken any action. As for the rank 3 who participated in the battle, they were all handed over to Tyrant and the rest. In the battlefield, the spirit-devouring king grass was also there. Su Mengyao had specifically requested to bring it along. According to Zi-Chen's original plan, it was to be left behind to guard the battlefield. However, Su Mengyao said that it needed to grow. This time, the rank 4 did not appear. When the battle was about to reach an hour, the dark heavenly ants left one after another. Let's go. Chin turned around and left. Tyrant and the rest followed him. The battle had been going on for more than 2 months. Everyone was used to such a scene. The Protoss in the distance also retreated. They had been watching the battle from the periphery. Some of them had been there for a long time and did not leave. The team rested and reorganized hundreds of miles away. Tyrant was proudly talking about his battle results. The dark heavenly ants that had entered the ground appeared again. According to the development in the past 2 months, they would be kept in Chen's world. After they finished recuperating, they would continue to participate in the battle. For more than 2 months, this scene had been playing out. Not only were the Aboriginals who saw this scene through the spiritual eagle aware of it, but even the Protoss in the distance were very clear about it. This had become a habit. However, this habit was broken today. Before Chin could keep all the dark heavenly ants, the surrounding void began to tremble. Shortly after, one space after another opened. The Aboriginals walked out from it. Looking at the scene in front of them, the Protoss in the distance had a change of expression. Tyrant and the rest's expression became extremely solemn. They took out their weapons and were on high alert. Chin looked around indifferently. A cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Paramello walked out from a space. He looked at Chin below and said coldly, Chen, today is the day you die. Chen replied indifferently, Initially, I wanted to play with you. Since you insist on courting death, I would like to say that today is the day Perry's forces will be annihilated. Paramello's expression changed. Shameless boasting. Parabili's voice sounded. He walked out from another space and said, sarcastically, Today, no matter what, you won't be able to leave here alive. Chen mocked you. Parabili laughed out loud and released his rank 4 aura. At the same time, in the other 3 directions, 3 existences who were releasing the aura of grade 4 also appeared. For rank 4s had actually come. Chin furrowed his brows. From Parabili's point of view, it was obvious that Chen was afraid, so he laughed even more proudly. In the distance, there was an uproar. No one had thought that the Perry family would make such a move. In the sky, the spirit eagles transmitted the scene they saw back to their respective clans. At this time, all the families who cared about Chen or Puri's power were paying attention to all this. Obviously, Puri's power was going all out to destroy Chen. As such, today would be the final battle. In the space image before them, many Aboriginals appeared. Their numbers were thousands of times more than Chen's group. At the same time, there were 4 4th-grade kings and countless 3rd-grade kings. If Chen did not have any other trump cards, he would not have any chance of surviving such a powerful team. Chen and his group were surrounded by layers upon layers of people. The surging killing intent was so strong that it was almost tangible. The space they were in had also become extremely solid due to the pressure, which even affected their speed. At first, Chen thought that there would be many powerhouses this time. He did not expect that there would be so many powerhouses and even more Aboriginals. This kind of lineup was naturally enough to deal with them. However, Chen obviously had more than just these people. He stopped his action of keeping the dark heavenly ants. The dark heavenly ants that entered his world fell to the ground again and disappeared. Tyrant and the others' faces turned ghastly as they did not know how many dark heavenly ants Chen was controlling. With so many Aboriginals in front of them, they felt extremely pressured. The Shun clan members were further away side. It was not easy for the Shun clan to have some powerhouses. They did not expect them to die like this. In the face of such a situation, no one thought that Chen's group could survive. This was because these Aboriginals were powerhouses and there were too many of them. Paramello looked at Chen, who was silent, and sneered. He then waved his hand and said, "Disperse!" The Aboriginals that he brought with him dispersed into the distance. Everyone kept a distance from each other. This was to prevent their energy from coming into contact with each other during the battle. This was to maximize the chances of killing the dark heavenly ants. Zi-Chun looked at this scene indifferently and still did not speak. In his world, there were still dark heavenly ants appearing. They seemed to be the dark heavenly ants that had just been kept. "Do you have anything else to say?" Paramello looked at Zi-Chun and asked. Zi-Chun shook his head and said no. At this moment, someone finally paid attention to Zi-Chun's domain. After such a long time, according to the original number of dark heavenly ants, there should be no more dark heavenly ants in Zi-Chun's world. However, why were they appearing continuously? Such a scene caused their expressions to change. Paramello obviously noticed this scene too. His eyes were fixed on Zi-Chun's domain. "You only noticed it now? Don't you think it's too late?" Zi-Chun sneered. At the same time, several more openings opened in his world. The dark heavenly ants in the openings were like a black torrent pouring down in torrents. After the dark heavenly ants landed, they disappeared. At this moment, although they guessed that there were many dark heavenly ants in Zi-Chun's world, they did not know exactly how many there were. "Kill him!" Without waiting for Paramello to speak, Perimboli, who was in the distance, roared and rushed toward Zi-Chun. At the same time, the other 3 grade 4 martial kings also rushed towards Zi-Chun from other directions. Looking at the 4 grade 4 martial kings, Zi-Chun smiled coldly. As his world opened, a grade 4 martial king aura burst out. A grade 4 martial king, dark heavenly, ant walked out and blocked Perimboli. At the same time, 3 grade 4 martial king, dark heavenly ants appeared in the other 3 directions and blocked the 4 people respectively. Grade 4 martial king, dark heavenly ant. Seeing this scene, all the aboriginals' faces changed drastically. As for Paramello, he felt that something was wrong. Chapter 3065. Zi-Chun had summoned 4 4th grade king and many 3rd grade king, dark heavenly ants. The number of dark heavenly ants was no less than the Peri Force's experts. In fact, he was still holding back as he wasn't sure if the Peri family had other trump cards up their sleeves. However, judging by the number of dark heavenly ants that he had summoned, it should be enough for him to win the battle. Under the control of the Ant King, all the dark heavenly ants emerged from the ground and launched an effective attack. As for the 4 4th grade king, they were dealt with by the 4 4th grade dark heavenly ants. Battle cries could be heard everywhere. When the members of the God clan saw the scene from afar, they were all shocked. Similarly, the masters of the various forces who were watching the scene through the spiritual eagle were also shocked. Obviously, with Zi-Chun summoning so many dark heavenly ants, the outcome of the battle was uncertain. The Peri force that had the absolute advantage was gradually losing their advantage. "Kill them!" A 3rd grade king, who was a captain, shouted. His natal spiritual weapon appeared in his hand, and he charged towards the dark heavenly ants. Behind him were some spirit beasts. When the spirit beasts moved forward, they brought with them a strong aura. Buzz! The ground suddenly trembled, and many dark heavenly ants appeared, blocking the path of the spirit beasts. Both sides began to bite and devour. The number of dark heavenly ants was far greater than what everyone had imagined. At that moment, there seemed to be an endless number of dark heavenly ants emerging from the ground. "Kill!" At the center of the battlefield, Tyrant shouted and charged towards the natives with the others. This time, they no longer had any scruples and could kill without restraint. Zi-Chun flew towards Peribilly. During this period of time, he took a glance at Paramello. As a 2nd grade king, Paramello stood there with a pale face. The confidence and arrogance that he had was long gone. Zi-Chun flew towards Peribilly and threw out a punch. He had activated the power of the lightning body. The yin and yang energy was also swirling around the surface of his fist, and a terrifying pressure was released. This was a war where life and death could happen at any time. Hence, Zi-Chun didn't hold back. This punch was also a thunder explosion. His fist exploded in front of Peribilly. The explosive thunder energy scattered in all directions, forming a destructive wave that sent the dark heavenly ants and the natives flying. After the blow, Zichen's body flew backwards. During this period of time, he unsheathed his saber and slashed down. A stream of saber light descended from the sky, drawing an arc in the air as it slashed towards Peribilly. The saber's aura was heavy as a mountain. It was the aura of ancestors' aura. Perimello's saber's hands, aura's head. Zichen's powerful attack was destroyed by Peribilly. However, as soon as he blocked Zichen's attack, the fourth grade king's dark, heavenly ant approached him. Die, Chens! Peribilly shouted angrily. His aura burst out completely. He was from the soldier tribe, and he sent the dark heavenly ant of the fourth grade king flying with one blow. Buzz! The heavenly thunder wings appeared behind Zichen's back. As the heavenly thunder wings flapped, he increased his speed to the maximum and disappeared from his spot. Perimello's attack destroyed the afterimage he left behind. In the next moment, Zichen appeared behind Perimello and unsheathed his saber. Perimello turned around and blocked with his weapon. The two forces of energy collided. At the moment of the explosion of energy, Zichen was forcefully pushed back. His figure disappeared again. Swoosh! When he reappeared, he was behind Perimello again. The Nether Chief once told Zichen that if he could withstand the King Fourth grades, Zichen did not give Perimello a chance to attack. He used his speed to dodge and attack. Moreover, he used his full strength in each of his attacks. Compared to Perimello, Zichen was not afraid of. If I can't exhaust your energy with one slash, I'll use 10 slashes. If 10 slashes are not enough, I'll use 100 slashes. Lightning 9 deaths. Still could not find an opponent here. The 10th slash. Zichen calculated silently in his heart. His figure turned into a flash of lightning and disappeared again. Perimello was furious, but he had lost his target. In terms of age, he was definitely older than Zichen. However, in terms of combat experience, he was obviously not as good as Zichen, who had been fighting all the time. The 20th slash. When Zichen's 20th slash fell, Perimello was already yelling in anger. Each of Zichen's attacks was full of power. He could only keep resisting. It was like fighting with someone of the same level. At this moment, he only had powerful means, but he could not cause any damage to Zichen. The King Fourth Grade's dark heavenly ant had gone to fight in other places. Perimello noticed that there were 2 dark heavenly ants of the same level beside the other 3 King Fourth Grades. Obviously, Zichen had concealed his true strength in the previous battle. When the 30th slash fell, Perimello had obviously become weak. His attacks were no longer fierce, and his face had turned pale. Zichen's figure flashed again. This time, he was not behind Perimello. Instead, he was standing in front of him. He put away his sheathed long saber and stared coldly at Perimello. Die. The next moment, a cold light flashed in his eyes. He rushed toward Perimello and threw a punch. This was the most powerful Thunderblast fist. The Yin-Yang rule power shrouded the surface of the fist, making the Thunderblast fist even more powerful and terrifying. Zichen's fist hit Perimello's weapon. The power of the Thunderblast fist exploded and instantly drowned Perimello's body. In the roar of energy, Perimello's body flew backward. He coughed up blood as he flew backward. Zichen's figure flashed again and punched again. The thunder continued to roar. Perimello, who had consumed a lot of energy, could not resist. His eyes were filled with horror. When the third punch fell, Perimello's aura had become very weak. Whoosh! Looking at Perimello's retreating figure, Zichen unsheathed his saber. This was a space-splitting slash that contained extremely strong rule power. It swept past Perimello's neck. Blood splattered everywhere. Paramello was beheaded. A rank for had died. In the distance, Paramello's face was ashen as he looked at his dead ancestor. Even a rank for could not do anything to Zichen. Who could kill him? At the same time, he felt despair in his heart. There was a momentary pause in the battle as everyone stared at Zichen, feeling incomparably shocked, especially the Protoss in the distance. They were only rank 2. They could not even defeat Wang Yiping's natives. They could not understand how Zichen could kill a rank 4. Could it be that this rank 4's combat strength was reduced? Kill. Leave no one alive. Chapter 3066. The moment Parabili died, a storm swept through the world. All the families who saw the scene through the spiritual eagle were shocked. At this moment, they had to admit that the world was going to change. The era of oppression on the deity clan was coming to an end. Unless, of course, Zichen would die here today. However, looking at the situation before them, how could Zichen, who was controlling 6 dark heavenly ants, be killed so easily? The master of the Klee family side, the world must acknowledge Zichen's existence. At this moment, he felt lucky that the Klee family did not attack this time. Otherwise, they would follow in Perry's footsteps. It seems that only the royal forces can deal with Zichen's team. If they don't attack, Perry's forces will be annihilated. Zichen's nightmare force will officially rise. Under the spiritual eagle's observation, the battle was still going on. However, Parabili's death was a huge blow to Perry's forces, seriously affecting their morale. Coupled with the dark heavenly ants that kept appearing from the ground, they could not see any hope. Moreover, Zichen, who had killed a 4th grade king, did not seem to have consumed any energy. He turned around and rushed toward his second opponent. This battle was almost impossible to continue. Looking at the battlefield where the morale was at its lowest, the battle was almost one-sided. Parabili reluctantly shouted for a retreat. He knew that Perry's forces had been defeated, completely defeated. The order to retreat had been given. But how could they retreat smoothly? Unknowingly, the number of dark heavenly ants that appeared was more than 10 times their number. Retreat quickly. Parabili shouted again, his voice echoing throughout the battlefield. The indigenous people who were in the battle gradually began to retreat. Just as a portion of the experts broke through the blockade and flew toward the city where Perry's forces was, they saw a black line in front of them. The black line covered the sky, forming darkness. Looking at the dark heavenly ants that formed a curtain of darkness, Parabili was in complete despair. Why are there so many of them? Did he control the queen ant? The number of dark heavenly ants had completely exceeded his imagination. His face was pale, and there was no sign of life in his eyes. The darkness was moving in this direction, and a terrifying pressure filled everyone's hearts. Some people couldn't bear it and turned to flee in other directions. The horizon was filled with darkness, forming a curtain of darkness. Everyone was in despair. Paramello turned around and shouted at Zichen, "Zichen, we surrender!" Zichen, who was fighting Wang Sipin, didn't respond at all. "We are willing to use resources to redeem our lives. We admit defeat in this battle." Paramello shouted again, "It's too late. When you threatened me with my friend's life, your fate was already sealed." Zichen responded coldly. In front of him, his rank for opponent was sent flying due to the huge consumption of energy. Rank for coughed up blood in midair, his eyes filled with shock. 2 4th grade king, level dark, heavenly ants rushed up and let out miserable shrieks. "Leave no one alive." Zichen's voice was still cold, and it was filled with determination. In fact, Zichen was willing to use resources in exchange for their lives. However, the queen ant was obviously unwilling to do so. The resources weren't of much use to her. What she needed were the corpses of the aborigines. After the dark heavenly ants devoured the corpses, they would turn the corpses into energy, which would be of great use to the queen ant. The more aborigines gathered by Paramello, the more dark heavenly ants Zi-Chin could use. At this moment, the darkness in all directions was closing in on them. It was as though a few black torrents had merged together. Everything in the surroundings had turned into darkness. The God Clan warriors who were watching the battle from a distance were so shocked that they couldn't say a word when they saw the black mass of people. Similarly, the masters of the forces who couldn't see anything through the spiritual eagle were also shocked. This time, there were even more dark heavenly ants, to the extent that their scalps were numb. Under such circumstances, no force dared to declare that they could go against Zi-Chin. If the battle really happened, what awaited them would definitely be annihilation. Looking at the densely packed, dark heavenly ants, everyone could already tell that Paramello's forces had lost their momentum. The black mass of dark heavenly ants shrouded the sky, confirming the name of darkness. This battle lasted for about 4 hours. The dark heavenly ants disappeared. At the same time, the army of Paramello's forces also disappeared. Without a doubt, everyone was dead. Even their corpses were gone. The dark heavenly ants dived into the ground. The surroundings became spacious again. Blood was everywhere, and the smell of blood was extremely strong. Monk and the others walked towards Zi-Chin. Their bodies were also covered in blood. Some of it was their own, and some of it was the enemy's. Everyone was injured, but they weren't in danger. At this moment, they looked at Zi-Chin. Zi-Chin said, "Let's go to the city." In today's battle, Paramello's forces had suffered heavy losses. Many of their absolute combat power had died. What Zi-Chin had to do next was to destroy this force. They walked towards the city where Paramello's forces were located. The deities at the back guessed his purpose. Hence, they all followed, but they all followed from afar. Along the way, everyone was silent. The short distance of several hundred miles could be reached very quickly to them. Zi-Chin arrived at the place. The city gate was closed. On the city wall, the figures of the natives appeared. They had seen everything that had happened in the previous battle through the spirit eagles. The dark heavenly ants reappeared and then surrounded the city. "My lord, please calm down." A voice came from above the city wall. Zi-Chin didn't give the order to attack. A moment later, the city gate opened. Large carriages, pulled by soul beasts, walked out of the city. Those large carriages were piled with crystals. Those were all Supreme Crystal. Moreover, they were all complete. They released a bright light that was a little dazzling. After the large carriages appeared, they were pulled by soul beasts. They stopped in front and lined up in a row. There were a total of 28 carriages. There were countless Supreme crystal piled up on the carriages. "My lord, these are all the resources we have. We are willing to contribute them to protect the lives of the people in Paramello's forces." Behind those carriages stood a middle-aged man. Behind the middle-aged man stood some women and children. This was the first time Zi-Chin saw the women and children of the natives. They had always been strong, but at this moment they showed their weak side. At the same time, many spiritual eagles were watching what was happening below from above. Those Supreme crystal made them envious. However, they were more concerned about Zi-Chen's attitude towards this matter, because this was related to Zi-Chen's attitude towards the other natives of this world. Chapter 3067. Zi-Chin glanced at the middle-aged man and nodded. Then he opened up his world and took away all the Supreme crystal. The new master of the Peri force heaved a sigh of relief. As long as the master did not pursue the matter, the Peri force would survive. After taking away all the Supreme crystal, Zi-Chin said, "Our grudges are written off." After saying that, Zi-Chin turned around and left. Monk and the rest followed. Their purpose was to seek revenge. Now that all the people who deserved to die were dead and the Peri force had suffered heavy losses, they had achieved their purpose. Naturally, they should leave. The dark heavenly ants that besieged the city returned to Zi Chen's world. Looking at Zi Chen and the disappearing dark heavenly ants, everyone in the Perry force relaxed. At the same time, they felt extremely regretful. If they had known that this would happen, they would definitely not have made an enemy out of Zi Chen. Now, not only did they not gain anything, they even caused their family to suffer heavy losses. At the same time, the aristocratic families who saw this scene through the spirit eagles also relaxed. Zi Chen did not completely destroy the Perry family. This proved that he did not have the ambition to dominate the world. This was enough for the Aboriginals. No one thought that Zi Chen was preparing to bide his time. It was because it was completely useless. The army of dark heavenly ants was enough to destroy many forces. Master, we are willing to join your force. When Zi Chen was moving forward, a rank 2 divine tribe stepped forward and said, Master, we are also willing to join. More divine tribe members stepped forward and expressed their desire to join the Nightmare Force. They expressed their absolute loyalty. Swoosh! Zi Chen's body flashed, and he disappeared with teleportation. After this battle, he would not be a threat in this world. He could completely calm down and develop his force. As such, the number of divine tribe members in the Nightmare Force was sufficient for the time being. Looking at Zi Chen's disappearance, the divine tribe members were extremely disappointed and left immediately. Naturally, they would not give up just like that. The situation in this world was changing. If they seized the opportunity, their fate would naturally change. Zi Chen returned to the Nightmare faction. After a few months of development, the place had been rebuilt, and the atmosphere had become lively again. The news of Zi Chen's victory quickly spread. This made all the Protoss who were part of the Nightmare organization seethe with excitement. Even the native forces had been defeated, so it was naturally safer for them to stay here. At this moment, they were all very happy. At the same time, they were happy for the choice they had made back then. This was because many people wanted to join the Nightmare faction, and some of those who had left wanted to return, but none of them had succeeded. Next, Zi Chen would leave the opportunity to these people. Not long after Zi Chen returned, some natives came looking for him. It was Klee's faction. This mine used to be under the jurisdiction of Kelly's organization. The person who came was the family head of the Kelly faction. The reason why he came personally was to show his sincerity. In the main hall, Zi Chen met with the patriarch of the Klee faction. His name was Klee Brunei, and the moment he arrived, he immediately stated his intentions. We're willing to buy all the resources collected by the Nightmare faction. The price will be 10% higher than the actual price. This was a very fair price. It was hundreds of times better than what the other factions had casually offered. Zi Chen said, If that's all, then you won't be able to obtain the Nightmare faction's friendship. Zi Chen knew very well why Klee's faction had come. It was nothing more than an alliance in the name of trade. However, it was clear that this price was not enough. Klee Brunei was not dismayed when he heard this, and he said again, We'll buy twice the normal price. Not counting the many years of oppression of the Protoss, under normal circumstances, they would make 3 times the profit. If other costs were removed, twice the profit would be the limit. Now that Klee Brunei was willing to pay twice the price, there was no profit to be made. Even if there was, it would be very little. It could be said that this was a very sincere price for friendship. Deal. Zi Chen did not hesitate and directly nodded in agreement, even though he had already guessed that many other factions were on their way. However, if the Nightmare faction wanted to develop for a long time, they had to make sure that their allies did not suffer losses. In this regard, Klee Brunei's faction had given them the right conditions. Klee Brunei did not expect Zi Chen to agree so quickly. This surprised him, but it made him even happier. Thus, when he left behind a sum of superb crystal resources. These resources were obtained from the Perry faction's shops. Obviously, after the last battle, the Perry faction's foundation had been shaken. Their original properties were being targeted by other factions and were beginning to be divided up. The enemies of the natives had never been the Protoss of the past, but the pack of tigers and wolves that claimed to be their allies. After Klee Brunei left, other factions came one after another, but Ziqin did not meet any of them, even though the benefits they offered were high enough. Several months passed quickly. Yi Qian, who had returned, led a group of newcomers and Wei Li to the awakening altar. The previous group had not yet awakened their powers. Recently, the Protoss outside the faction have expressed their desire to join us. On this day, Su Mengyao came to find Ziqin and told him about this. He knew about this, but Su Mengyao had come specifically to tell him about it for some other reason. Ziqin looked at her. If we can't recruit people for the time being, then let's cooperate with them. Su Mengyao said, the AI should be breaking through soon. At that time, we'll have 2 awakening altars, and more people will be able to awaken. Under such circumstances, we will have to recruit others sooner or later. Or rather, we will have to recruit some new miners. Now that we can get resources at a high price from the Klee family, why not collect them from other places and then resell them? Ziqin hesitated slightly. Is that okay? Su Mengyao smiled. Based on the rewards given by the natives, I calculated that the Klee faction will still be able to make a profit if we collect enough resources at this price. It's just a matter of how much. In this world, no one would complain about having too many resources. So as long as we provide enough resources, the Klee family's profits will be greater. Ziqin nodded and said, then what do you suggest? We will pay them double. So when we collect resources, we will collect them at the normal price. This price was much higher than normal transactions between the Protoss and the natives. Of course, it was still lower than what Ziqin was paying, but at this price, she believed that no faction would refuse. Very well. I'll have to trouble you to arrange this matter, Ziqin said. Everything here was arranged by Su Mengyao. She took care of this force in an orderly manner, which made Ziqin feel very relieved. Chapter 3068. Ziqin was refining the Supreme Crystal. This kind of law crystal could not only increase the speed of cultivation, but it could also speed up Ziqin's comprehension. Ziqin currently needed to comprehend the true meaning and break through to the next realm. Therefore, his Supreme Crystal was consumed very quickly, but his improvement was also very obvious. After knowing that Ziqin would not meet anyone no matter how high the price was, the other forces gradually stopped coming. They were very regretful that they had missed such a good opportunity. Amidst this, the Klee family had gained the friendship of Ziqin alone. It could be said that they had gained the most this time. Therefore, in the following purge of the Perry family, the other forces deliberately excluded the Klee family. In just a few months, all the shops of the Perry family in other cities were all taken away. After that, many forces came outside the city where the Perry family was located. Their goal was to completely destroy the Perry family. The new head of the Perry family stood on the city wall and looked down at the crowd below. He said coldly, "You are going too far." Someone below said, "If you know what's good for you, open the city gate yourselves. This way, we might give you people a chance to be slaves and even leave your young bloodline alive. Otherwise, after we enter the city, the only ones alive can only be women. Women had the ability to give birth and could reproduce, so they would live. As for the others, they would naturally be destroyed. From then on, the Perry family would disappear from this continent forever." This was also why the other forces were hesitant about targeting Ziqin, because once they were defeated or suffered heavy losses, they would face the danger of being exterminated, just like what was happening now. Looking at the silent head of the Perry family, the person below said again, "Our time is very precious. We will give you an incense's time to consider. If not, bear the consequences." The new head of the Perry family said indifferently you are going too far. Do you really think that there is no one left in the Perry family?" As the sound of his voice faded, a powerful aura came from the top of the city wall. A person stood on the city wall. He was wearing armor that covered his entire body. His entire body was exuding a tyrannical aura. Fourth grade. Seeing this scene, the expressions of everyone below changed greatly as they looked at that person in disbelief. Not only was he a rank 4 craftsman, but he was also wearing a set of armor that covered his entire body. This kind of armor could only be crafted by the royal family of the craftsman race. This was a protective armor. If the royal family wanted to refine a set, it would cost an extremely high price. At the same time, wearing the protective armor in battle would greatly increase one's combat strength. However, what they couldn't understand was why the Perry family didn't send someone with protective armor when they fought Zichen last time. In that case, Zichen's death was certain. The new head of the Perry family looked at the shocked crowd below, and his expression became extremely complicated. He recalled the conversation with Paramello. "If we fail this time, then hand over all the Supreme Crystal to Zichen in exchange for your freedom." I believed that Zichen wouldn't refuse under the watchful eyes of so many forces. "Don't ever touch our family's foundation. That is our last resort, the only way to ensure the survival of our bloodline. Why don't you send them out together? Won't the chances of winning be greater this way? If 4 rank 4 kings can't kill Zichen, it's useless to send one more just in case." Paramello's last resort, which he had left behind, worked today. A family with a rank 4 king was bound to be a big family, not to mention that this rank 4 king had protective armor. Under such circumstances, unless these forces also sent a rank 4 king, but if a rank 4 king was killed during the battle, they would lose their foundation. The Perry family would be a lesson to them. The Perry family didn't have any reaction when the family's shops were taken away, because they couldn't keep those shops, and it wasn't time for the family to be exterminated. In the face of such a situation, their foundation naturally had to be used. No force dared to go against them. The people of these forces looked at each other and returned in disappointment. In the main hall, Zichen was still refining the Supreme Crystal. In his world, the Queen Ant was refining the resources obtained from this battle. With these resources, it would be able to create even more 4th stage, King, Dark, Heavenly Ants. In this battle, it had gained a lot. In another area, several of Zichen's doppelgangers were comprehending the Ancestral Wing Tablet. They temporarily gave up on comprehending the Ancestral Saber Tablet. In their hands, each of them held a piece of Supreme Crystal. With the help of the high-quality rule power in the Supreme Crystal, they comprehended the true meaning in the ancestral steel. Rays of brilliance flowed from the surface of their bodies. Not far away, the deity's doppelganger was also refining the Supreme Crystal, striving for a breakthrough in strength. Since the last time he refined the netherworld power, the divine power flowing in his body had changed into the netherworld power. Even though he had broken through during this period, the divine power in his body still didn't exist. However, the netherworld power was obviously much stronger than the divine power, so the doppelganger wasn't depressed. And at that time, Zichen needed a powerful doppelganger. Buzz! Just as the deity's doppelganger was refining the Supreme Crystal, a tremor came from not far away, with a wave of ripples. The deity's doppelganger turned his head and saw that a true meaning had appeared on the doppelgangers. Obviously, they had comprehended the true meaning of the Ancestral Wing Tablet. The deity's doppelganger smiled. The next moment, the real body appeared. The doppelgangers all returned to Zichen's body. As he accepted the enlightenment of the doppelganger, the true meaning of the Ancestral Tao Tablet also flowed around him. Behind Zichen, the heavenly thunder wings unfolded. The Ancestral Wing Tablet in front of him flew toward Zichen. The next moment, surrounded by 3 different levels of true meaning, the Ancestral Wing Tablet merged into the heavenly thunder wings on Zichen's back. Whoosh! Behind Zichen, the heavenly thunder wings shook gently. A ray of brilliance appeared and flowed in this world. It was a real ray of light that couldn't be captured by the naked eye. Such speed was much faster than the God Clan's Fleetfoot. The brilliance flashed again, and Zichen's figure reappeared. The doppelgangers that had disappeared earlier reappeared and began to comprehend the blade will of the ancestral saber tablet. Zichen turned his head, nodded at the deity's doppelganger, and his figure disappeared again. Comprehending the first king level true meaning of extreme speed was considered a big gain. Among the Nightmare faction, the first batch of God Clan forces came to exchange resources. They brought a lot of resources, and after Su Mengyao found someone to check them carefully, they gave them a reasonable price. This price was 100 times more than what they usually exchanged, which was a pleasant surprise to them. Thus, after they left, the news began to spread. Following that, more Protoss forces came to this place to trade for resources. Their actions completely drew a line between them and the original native forces. Chapter 3069. The Nightmare faction used to control 5 mineral veins, which were number 1 to number 5. After Zichen investigated all the mineral veins, he gave up on 4 of them, leaving only number 3 mineral vein. The purity of the spiritual energy in this mineral vein was extremely high, so Zichen valued it the most. After learning that something was wrong with this mineral vein, he immediately ended his cultivation and went to number 3 mineral vein with Su Mengyao. When they arrived at number 3 mineral vein, Zichen saw that the miners had all retreated and were looking ahead in fear. Monk and the others were standing around the mineral vein. Their territory covered the area below, and they were on high alert. In the mine below, smoke constantly gushed out and rose up, shrouding the entire mine. The smoke was formed by pure spiritual energy. When did this happen? Zichen looked down and asked. Last night. Longhu, who was in charge of this place, said, Were there any casualties? No. When the abnormality happened, I asked everyone to retreat. In this situation, it was highly likely that they had encountered the king of God's soul essence. For the ordinary miners, the discovery of the king of God's soul essence meant disaster and death. However, for Zichen and the others, the discovery of the king of God's soul essence meant a great opportunity. The king of God's soul essence was much more advanced than the Supreme Crystal. Once refined, one's realm would improve by leaps and bounds. I'll go in and take a look. Zichen looked down and said, Be careful. Su Mengyao said, I'll go with you. Monk flew toward them. Zichen shook his head and said no need. I'll take the spirit-devouring king grass. You guys stay outside. Also, remember to evacuate them to avoid any accidents. Zichen walked toward the mine below. During this time, he could feel the rich spiritual energy rushing toward him. As he walked deeper into the mine, the spiritual energy became thicker. Zichen's spiritual thoughts shrouded the surroundings, and the spirit-devouring king grass floated above his head. The mine was huge, and it meandered deep into the ground. Zichen did not encounter any danger, and he went deep quickly. Soon, he reached the end of the mineral vein, where the rich spiritual energy was gushing out. Zichen took a deep breath. The spiritual energy that entered his body was very dense. It was as if he was refining the Supreme Crystal. If he were to stay here and cultivate, his cultivation speed would definitely increase. However, compared to the spiritual energy here, Zichen was more willing to explore deeper. He glanced at the spirit-devouring king grass beside him and asked, Is there any way to take me in? The roots of the spirit-devouring king grass released a ray of light that enveloped Zichen. In the next moment, Zichen's body floated up uncontrollably. The spirit-devouring king grass fell on top of Zichen's head. It was as if a blade of grass had grown on his head. Then it took him forward. His body melted into the ground and kept moving downward. His spiritual thoughts could not explore the surroundings, so he did not know what was around him. He could only see a vast expanse of whiteness. As he went deeper, Zi-Chen felt a strong spiritual energy fluctuation. It was the superm crystal contained in the ground. He could clearly see pieces of superm crystal. They were all pure and complete. They could be used after they were mined. It would not be long before the miners could mine here. As he went deeper, he found more and more superm crystal. After about a quarter of an hour, Zi-Chen suddenly felt a ripple. This ripple was very strong, and it even touched the light outside his body. The spirit-devouring king grass flew forward, but it slowed down significantly. It seemed to have sensed some danger. The ripple was still there, but he did not know where it came from. Whoosh! As Zi-Chen continued to descend, he arrived at a relatively spacious area. This was where the ripples came from. Zi-Chen saw a piece of superm crystal in front of him. This piece of superm crystal was about the size of a human head. It was sparkling and translucent. He could vaguely see that a small sprite was sealed inside. This is the godly king's soul essence. Looking at the lone crystal in this small space, Zi-Chen's expression changed. He was extremely shocked. The sprite sealed in the godly king's soul essence seemed to be in a deep sleep. It was not aggressive at all. The ripples that spread out seemed to come from the sprite's breath. At this moment, Zi-Chen saw the godly king's soul essence with his own eyes. This was enough to prove the value of this mine. The godly king's soul essence did not move at all. It seemed to be because it had not been mined yet. After coming here, the spirit-devouring king grass was very careful. The light that covered its body became very unstable. It seemed to be under a strong attack. Zi-Chen felt a sense of uneasiness from the ripples it emitted. "Can we go any deeper?" Zi-Chen, who was covered in light, asked. The spirit-devouring king grass was hesitant. It seemed to be very worried. Zi-Chen said, "Then let me go here." The spirit-devouring king grass withdrew its light, and Zi-Chen's figure appeared. The moment he appeared, the ripples that spread out in all directions fell on him. The ripples directly entered his sea of consciousness. Like layers of waves, they attacked his soul. Zi-Chen's face turned pale. He was very surprised to be suddenly attacked by a soul attack. However, his soul power was extremely strong. After he reacted, it formed an even stronger ripple that suppressed this strange power. After his soul completely suppressed this ripple, Zi-Chen looked at the godly king's soul essence in front of him. He found that it was still in a deep sleep. Could it be that these godly king's soul essences rely on soul attacks? Zi-Chen flew forward. The spirit-devouring king grass followed him. He came to the front of the godly king's soul essence and reached out to check it. His palm fell on the godly king's soul essence. The soul essence trembled slightly. The sleeping spirit seemed to have woken up. A strong ripple appeared from within. At the same time, a sharp attack directly entered his sea of consciousness and attacked his soul. This was the attack of the godly king's soul essence. Although Zi-Chen was prepared, this attack still caused some trouble for him. It could be seen that the other divine generals were only 9th grade divine generals. When they suddenly encountered such an attack, they would definitely die. After Zi-Chen neutralized this power, the godly king's soul essence in front of him tried to escape. Zi-Chen reached out his palm. Lightning flashed in his palm and fell on the godly king's soul essence. Buzz! Another tremor came from the godly king's soul essence. However, this time it was not an attack. It was restrained. The spirit in the soul essence seemed to have lost its consciousness and gradually quieted down. The light on the surface of the crystal also seemed to have dimmed. The godly king's soul essence lost its powerful attack and turned into a crystal that could absorb energy. Looking at the changes of the godly king's soul essence, Zichen was very surprised. He directly put it away. When he put away the godly king's soul essence, the space in front of Zichen suddenly distorted and a space appeared. Chapter 3070. What appeared in front of Zichen was a huge space. In this space, there were countless crystals the size of a human head. Inside these crystals, there were small elf-like creatures. Without a doubt, these were the godly king's soul essences. This was the first time Zichen had seen a godly king's soul essence. But it didn't mean that he didn't know anything about it. In a mineral vein, the godly king's soul essences were the best of the best. There were usually not many of them. There were usually only a few pieces or one piece. But now, what appeared in front of Zichen were countless godly king's soul essences. This was obviously abnormal. This was because so many godly king's soul essences couldn't exist in the same space at the same time. This was because the spiritual energy in the space couldn't reach it and couldn't be maintained. He looked ahead. These slumbering godly king's soul essences extended into the depths. He couldn't detect them with his spiritual senses, so he could only see them with his eyes. Behind him, the spirit-devouring king, Grass, trembled slightly. In Zichen's perception, it was excited, but more than that, it was afraid. "What are you afraid of?" Zichen asked. The spirit-devouring King Grass couldn't communicate with him, so he could only go ahead and observe. Zichen walked in front of the godly king's soul essences. After a slight hesitation, he opened his world. He didn't know what was in the depths and what the spirit-devouring King Grass was afraid of. However, under such abnormal circumstances, it was very likely that there was danger ahead. Therefore, it shouldn't be a problem to collect more godly king's soul essences. When the world opened, it was like a black hole that devoured the godly king's soul essences. The moment it entered the world, these slumbering godly king's soul essences came to life as if they had been extracted. Waves of powerful fluctuations spread in the world. However, to Zichen, these attacks obviously couldn't pose a threat. They were all suppressed by the power of the natural order. Powerful auras surged in the world, but they couldn't do anything to Zichen. One by one, the godly king's soul essences were collected by him. This was an opportunity, a truly great opportunity. Looking at the disappearing god king's soul essences, the spirit-devouring King Grass was once again agitated. Clearly, these things would be of great use to its advancement. Now that he had collected so many godly king soul essences, it was already an amazing resource for Zichen. Therefore, even if he left now, his harvest would still be great. As he continued forward, Zichen suddenly saw something appear in front of him. It was the only other thing that had appeared in this place, filled with God King's soul essences. He stopped collecting the godly king's soul essence and flew forward. Everything there was completely reflected in his eyes. It was a weapon that was black in color and had traces of rust on its surface. It was a large black bow without an arrow. There were carvings on the body of the bow. It was a type of beast that Zichen had never seen before. It was extremely mighty. At that moment, the black bow was floating silently in front of him. There was a domain-like space around it, and outside this domain were pieces of godly king soul essences. It looked like these soul essences were protecting the bow. After seeing the black bow, the spirit-devouring King Grass's body trembled involuntarily. Clearly, this was the source of its fear. Zichen looked around and did not see any other danger. But what was the spirit-devouring King Grass afraid of? Was it just that unmanned bow without an arrow? In Zichen's perception, some weapons were born with a murderous aura. It seemed natural that a plant like the spirit-devouring King Grass could sense it. However, the spirit-devouring King Grass was not inexperienced. It had seen a few of the 9 extremes weapons. Facing this black bow, it should not be so weak. After looking around again and finding no other danger, Zichen decided to go and get the bow. For it to appear here, the bow must be extraordinary. Despite the spirit-devouring king grass warning, Zichen still decided to take a look. This weapon was extraordinary. If he could obtain it, it would definitely increase his battle strength. He left the spirit-devouring king grass outside to prevent any accidents. Then he flashed into the space. Everything went smoothly. He did not encounter any obstacles. The black bow did not emit any terrifying aura. It seemed to be a very ordinary weapon. Zichen used his spiritual senses to check the surroundings. Still, he did not sense any danger. Thus he walked forward. He did not walk fast. He was very careful. When he was only one step away from the black bow, he still did not sense any danger. There were no other restrictions around the black bow. Clearly, this was a weapon that could be easily obtained. Am I really that lucky? Zichen thought to himself. Then he reached out and grabbed the black bow. The moment his palm came into contact with the black longbow, the longbow lit up and Zichen felt sharp pain in his palm. The black bow in front of him disappeared. In its place was a strange beast with a horn. It looked like a qilin. At this moment, it opened its mouth and bit Zichen's arm. A strange force, like poison, entered Zichen's body. Zichen gradually lost control of his body and fell into paralysis. Swoosh! 2 leaves flew from behind and covered Zichen's body. They wrapped around him and pulled him backward. Zichen's body was pulled out of the space. At the same time, the unknown heavenly beast that was formed by the black bow was also pulled out because it was biting Zichen's arm. Zichen's powerful physical strength was useless at this moment. He was directly bitten by the unknown heavenly beast. His body could no longer move even though he had already walked out of the space. Buzz! Buzz! Just as Zichen came out, the King of God's soul essences around him began to vibrate. Then they immediately flew toward him and entered the unknown heavenly beast's body. The aura released by the heavenly beast became stronger and stronger. The spirit-devouring king grass wrapped around Zichen's body and released it. The slender leaves were like a straight spear, piercing toward the heavenly beast. The attack of the spirit-devouring king grass was extremely sharp. It was extremely lethal even to a third-grade king. However, its attack was unable to break through the defense of the heavenly beast. Swoosh! 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 Although it knew that its attack was ineffective, the spirit-devouring king grass continued to attack. At the same time, it sent out waves of energy to warn Zichen. Zichen could not move. His body was paralyzed as if he was poisoned. However, his mind was not affected at all. Looking at the surrounding soul essences entering the strange heavenly beast's body and feeling its aura getting stronger and stronger, he knew that if this continued, it would be extremely troublesome. Chapter 3071. In front of the spirit-devouring king grass, Zichen and the strange heavenly beast had disappeared. The spirit-devouring king grass, which knew Zichen very well, knew where Zichen had gone. The divine king's soul essences that were previously restless had now dimmed down once again. The spirit-devouring king grass immediately rushed forward and stuck its roots into one of the god king's soul essences. Then it began to devour its energy. The other god king's soul essences floated there quietly, not even releasing any ripples. Zichen returned to his own world, and the strange heavenly beast followed him here. As soon as he appeared, the divine clone was right in front of him, and he punched out at the heavenly beast. The deity clone's fist was infused with netherworld energy and hit the heavenly beast's head. Accompanied by an energy explosion, the strange heavenly beast finally let go and flew away. The deity clone's fist was powerful enough, and being struck directly by it, even Wang Sanpin would die. Yet this strange heavenly beast did not seem to have any reaction at all. Its body fell to the ground and rolled away. However, it quickly stood up again, shook its head, and charged at Zichen again. Buzz! In front of Zichen, a ray of rule light fell and formed a ripple barrier, blocking the deity clone. The heavenly beast stretched out its sharp claws and struck forward. Accompanied by an explosion, the ripple barrier in front of Zichen shattered, and the powerful attack landed on his body. Swoosh! Zichen's body dissipated, leaving only an afterimage. Damn you! How dare you disturb my sleep? At this moment, a cold and angry voice came from the strange heavenly beast. I don't care who you are, I will kill you. The heavenly beast suddenly turned around, and its sharp claws slashed through the sky again. Zichen's figure was hit. His body slid backwards, and a bloody wound appeared on his chest. His physical cultivation technique was the lightning body, and it was powerful enough. He had never seen it being broken in one strike. The opponent's strength was far beyond Zichen's expectations. The divine avatar arrived from the other side and threw another punch. His target was still his opponent's head. Damned netherworld, you think you can kill me? The heavenly beast let out a furious roar, and its figure strangely disappeared. When it reappeared, it was at the side of the divine avatar, and its sharp claws struck the divine avatar's head. With a bang, the clone was sent flying. Its head was already badly mutilated. I didn't manage to destroy you, netherworld. There was a look of surprise in the heavenly beast's eyes. Then it asked in confusion, Who is Yu Ming? Why would I say that you are the netherworld? The divine avatar retreated, allowing blood to flow from the wound on his head. He stared at the other in fear. If it weren't for the fact that he had the heavenly god's bone, the previous blow would have split his head open. This strange heavenly beast stood there, not attacking immediately. Its originally cold eyes were now filled with doubt. Who am I? Who are you? Where is this place? I was sleeping earlier. Why am I sleeping here? Zichen looked at the other party, and his expression became very serious. This was the heavenly beast that had been manifested by the black longbow. Not only was it ridiculously powerful, but it also seemed to have an extraordinary origin. It was called the Netherworld Doppelganger, and the power of the Doppelganger was the power of the Netherworld. Who are you? Zichen stared at the other party and asked in a low voice, Who am I? The heavenly beast turned around and looked at Zichen. How would I know who I am? No, it was you who woke me up. You must know who I am. You want to harm me, don't you? Hearing the other party's words, Zichen felt that this heavenly beast might have a problem with its brain. At that moment, the other party shouted coldly, You must want to harm me. You must die. After saying that, it charged at Zichen again. Zichen snorted coldly and said, I don't care if you're really stupid or just pretending to be. Since you've come in, don't even think about coming out. After saying that, Zichen activated the world's precepts. Streaks of precepts' power descended from the sky. A part of it pressed down on the heavenly beast, while the other part formed a spatial seal, trapping the heavenly beast within. The heavenly beast was suppressed by the precepts, and it continued to charge around violently. Its attacks were so powerful that it almost shook Zichen's world. Zichen stared at the other party indifferently. Even more powerful precepts' power descended from the sky, suppressing the other party. The heavenly beast saw that it was unable to break through the spatial seal, and gradually calmed down. Just as Zichen thought that the other party had given up, the other party's horn suddenly released a powerful light. In the next moment, a loud shout rang out, Heaven Splitter! A ray of light flew out from the horn and landed on the spatial seal. A powerful force instantly destroyed many of Zichen's precepts, and then the spatial seal was torn apart. The unicorn heavenly beast that looked like a qilin flew out from it. Die. After it came out, it charged at Zichen. Boom! On Zichen's body, energy roared. The power of the lightning body instantly erupted, forming a destructive wave. A dazzling light filled the surroundings. This is the power of the lightning body. Who are you? How did you master the lightning body? The heavenly beast that charged forward spoke again. However, before he could answer, the heavenly beast said again, "What is the power of the lightning body? Why do I know? Do I know the lightning body?" Although it was very abnormal, its attack did not stop. It directly came in front of Zichen and clawed down. Zichen activated the lightning body with all his might and struck out with his strongest lightning explosion. Boom! The power of the lightning body exploded, forming a destructive wave that swept towards the heavenly beast. This is the lightning explosion of the lightning body. Who are you? The heavenly beast roared again, but it was still intact. Go to hell. At this moment, the divine clone appeared from the other side, came to the side of the heavenly beast, and slashed down. This was the stone saber that Zichen had obtained in the past. This saber looks very familiar. Is it that saber? The stone saber struck the heavenly beast, and with a violent roar of energy, the heavenly beast was sent flying. I don't care who you are. My head hurts so much now, so I have to kill you. The heavenly beast was sent flying, and it shook its head again. Its eyes became very cruel, and with a shake of its body, it transformed into a black longbow again. Heaven splitter! In the sky, a loud shout faintly sounded. The black longbow was automatically pulled into a full moon. In Zichen's world, all the spiritual energy of heaven and earth gathered towards the black longbow. An extremely tyrannical aura was released. At the same time, this aura was filled with a sense of danger. An arrow, completely composed of energy, appeared on the longbow. In the next moment, the bowstring trembled and the arrow pierced through the sky, heading straight for Zichen. One after another, the rule force fell, forming a ripple barrier in front of Zichen. Smack! 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 Chapter 3072. Looking at the incoming arrow, Zichen felt an unprecedented sense of deadly crisis. Countless rule power descended from the sky and landed in front of him, forming a ripple barrier. However, those ripple barriers were completely useless. They directly exploded. His figure flashed, and he was already thousands of miles away. During this time, countless rule power descended. The barrier formed by the rule power was Zichen's strongest defense. Bang! An arrow hole appeared. The arrow instantly penetrated the countless defenses within thousands of miles and arrived in front of Zichen. Zichen's body disappeared and turned in another direction. The arrow in front of him instantly changed direction and charged at him again. It seemed that the arrow would not dissipate until it hit its target. Zichen's face was filled with horror. He did not expect this heavenly beast to be so powerful. As his figure flickered again and again, he saw the black longbow being drawn into a full moon again. Immediately after, a second arrow flew over. This arrow was even faster, as if it had teleported through space. In the blink of an eye, it was in front of Zichen. Facing this second arrow, Zichen could not resist at all. He could only activate his thunder physique to form the strongest defense. At the same time, he also mobilized all the rule power in front of him to form a barrier. The two arrows arrived one after another, piercing through Zichen's layers of defense and arriving in front of Zichen. At this moment, Zichen crossed his arms. Lightning filled the surface of his body, and his mind was blank. Drops of cold sweat fell from Zichen's forehead. Lightning flashed on his defense, bright and dazzling. His defense was strong, but it could not be stronger than the previous rule, power defense. However, he did not wait for the arrow to break through his defense and penetrate his body. He was even ready to make a move for his soul to escape. The arrow stopped in front of Zichen. The light continued to flash and spin, causing the space to distort. It proved that its current state was still terrifying. However, the arrow did not move forward again. Instead, it stopped outside the lightning defense. At the same time, the second arrow did the same. Zi-Chen was stunned. Did the other party let him go? To be able to control the arrows in such a situation, this level of control was truly amazing. However, as he turned to look at the heavenly beast and saw the shock in its eyes, Zi-Chen knew that was not the case. The other party still wanted to kill him, but he didn't know why the arrows suddenly stopped. With a shake of its body, it turned back into a black longbow and shot out another arrow. The arrow pierced through the air and arrived in front of Zi-Chen. This time, Zi-Chen did not set up a defensive barrier. The arrow stopped in front of him and hovered outside the barrier. Damn it, how did this happen? An exasperated voice came from the black longbow. Then another arrow flew out, but the result was the same. A series of arrows shot out in quick succession, all of them circling around Zi-Chen, not daring to take another step forward. Finally, the heavenly beast from the bow cried out, "You are the successor of the lightning physique. I remember now, I can break through this world, but I can't hurt the successor of the lightning physique." The arrows around Zi-Chen all dispersed, allowing him to breathe a sigh of relief. Just a moment ago, he had felt a strong threat of death. The heavenly beast named Patian was now dejected, and its aura was no longer violent. It said to Zi-Chen, "Kid, you should be glad. I can kill all living things in this world, but I can't kill the successor of the lightning physique." The lightning around Zi-Chen's body dissipated. He looked at the heavenly beast, but he did not know what to say. His divine clone was far away. He had already fled because, as long as his divine clone was alive, the soul of his true body would not be destroyed. This was also the double preparation that Zi-Chen had made when he felt the danger. In another place, the queen ant's eyes were full of vigilance. Even though it was far away, it still felt the threat of the arrow. "How did you find me?" After a long silence, the heavenly beast named Patian spoke. "I found you by following the mine." Zi-Chen said, "I noticed something strange about the mine, so I came to take a look. I didn't expect to see a bow." "What do you mean by a bow?" "It's Lord Patian," Patian said unhappily. "Yes, I saw Lord Patian who had turned into a bow," Zi-Chen said. Seemingly satisfied with Zi-Chen's attitude, Patian nodded and said, "So you don't know me? What's my name?" Zi-Chen shook his head and said, "Even now I know nothing about Lord." Patian turned his head and looked at Yuming in the distance and said, "What's the matter with him? And why does he have that blade in his hand?" "He is my doppelganger. I found that blade in a cave." "What kind of cave would have such a blade?" "The last level of the Lightning Divine Palace, the place called the Abyss." "What Lightning Divine Palace? Is it very famous?" "I've never heard of it." Seeing that Zi-Chen was about to explain the Lightning Divine Palace, Patian waved his claw and said, "Forget it. Lord Patian has no interest in knowing that place. Being able to find that blade is your fortune. Is this the world you created?" "Yes." Zi-Chen nodded his head. "Seems like it's not bad. I'll stop here for now. If you encounter any danger, you can trouble me to help you. However, I'm currently very weak, so I won't help you for free. You'll have to pay me." "What kind of payment?" Zi-Chen asked. "There's nothing good in your world. Just that thing. 8 or 10 of them will do." Patian pointed at the God King's soul essence and said. Zi-Chen looked like he was in a difficult position. "If you want Lord Patian to help, that's the minimum requirement." Heavenbreaker smiled complacently, and then his figure flashed and arrived at the top of a mountain. He glanced at the queen ant as a wisp of disdain flashed through his eyes. Weak ant. Then he closed his eyes and fell asleep. Actually, Patian was unable to relax at all. He even felt that it was very dangerous. From the blankness he felt when he first woke up, he was able to remember many things now. Perhaps he might have forgotten some other things, but he couldn't forget the most important thing. If you meet the successor of the lightning physique one day, You'll follow him, and protect him. In other words, it was a servant. However, Patian was obviously unwilling to be a servant of such a weak little fellow. Fortunately, he was smart enough to not expose this matter. Now that he could stay, he didn't need to be a servant. The corners of his mouth curled up. He was clearly smiling. Chen didn't know what Lord Patian was thinking, but he was incomparably delighted in his heart. Because there were many God King soul essences outside, Lord Patian didn't mention it. It was probably because he didn't notice that scene when he woke up. It seemed that although he was very strong, his brain wasn't very bright. Chen chuckled as he thought of this. Chapter 3073. Chen didn't know what Heavenbreaker was thinking, and Heavenbreaker didn't know what Chen was plotting. Both of them had their own thoughts, and they had a tacit understanding. With a flash of light, Chen's figure appeared. He looked at the God King's soul essences around him, and there were still countless of them. If 8 or 10 pieces were enough to get Heavenbreaker to act once, then the God King's soul essences here were enough for him to act many times. After isolating Heavenbreaker's area, Chen opened his world and began to collect the God King's soul essences. He didn't know where these God King's soul essences came from, and whether or not it was because of Heavenbreaker, who had an abnormal brain. However, since he had discovered them, then the resources here were all his. When collecting the God King's soul essences, Chen had done a very good job of keeping it a secret, so Heavenbreaker didn't know. Because his world was infinitely large, even if it was limited, it could still avoid Heavenbreaker senses. The spirit-devouring Kinggrass was refining the God King's soul essences, so Chen didn't disturb it. With the suppression of his power of laws, the God King's soul essences were quickly collected. The spiritual energy fog outside the mine grew thicker and thicker. Everyone stared at the mine below, and their expressions became more and more serious. This was because Chen had been in there for a long time, but the spiritual energy fog showed no signs of dissipating. Su Mengyao could sense the spirit-devouring Kinggrass's aura. As long as the spirit-devouring Kinggrass's aura existed, she believed that Chen was fine. After waiting for a long time, everyone noticed that the fog below was gradually dissipating, and no more fog was coming out of the mine. Everyone's expressions changed, and they waited patiently. When the fog completely dissipated, Chen appeared in the mine. "What's underground?" Everyone came forward and asked curiously. Chen didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced at the miners and said, "The danger has been resolved." Everyone continue. The miners all breathed a sigh of relief when they heard this, and then they entered the mine again. Now that the Nightmare faction didn't lack resources, their mining rewards were raised again, and this made them very motivated. "The harvest this time is great. Let's go," Chen said to the others. After leaving behind a few people to guard the area, the others headed for the Nightmare faction's base. After returning to the encampment, Chen took out some God King's soul essences. This was the first time everyone had seen the Godly King's soul essence. They were all very curious. Tyrant's eyes were shining brightly as he looked at the Godly King's soul essence. "I've already taken all the soul essences inside. Although this mine is still very big, it doesn't have any more value," Chen said. "Are there many of these soul essences?" Su Mengyao asked curiously. Chen nodded and said a lot. "It's enough for us to break through again." Everyone was overjoyed when they heard this. Next, Chen gave everyone 2 Godly King soul essences for them to refine. At the same time, he told Su Mengyao that she could use the spirit-devouring Kinggrass to investigate. Its special ability allowed it to detect the size of the underground mine. Su Mengyao had no objection to this. The spirit-devouring Kinggrass was like a fish in water when it came to this world. There should be nothing that could hurt it now. After giving the spirit-devouring Kinggrass a few Godly King soul essences, it left the underground. Next, Everyone started to refine the godly king's soul essences and strive to break through again. However, Su Mengyao did not have the time. She still had to buy resources from other factions. After hearing about the Nightmare faction, more divine tribe factions were willing to come here to trade. After all, the harvest here was 100 times more than what they had before. The Carry faction also sent people here. Just as Su Mengyao said, they would earn very little if they traded at this price. However, as long as the quantity was high, the profit would still be considerable. Once all the resources mined by the divine tribe factions in the outer region were gathered to the Carry faction, the difference in the resources they would earn would be a terrifying figure. Because the Carry faction had allied with the Nightmare faction, many factions felt pressured even though they did not have any substantial improvement in their battle strength. Apart from that, the second biggest impact on them was that the divine tribe factions in the outer region were gradually breaking away from their control. Previously, they would go there every half a year and obtain a lot of resources each time. However, the resources given to them were very little now. There were even some that directly told them that the resources were not mined. As for the reason, naturally they could find out. They gave all the resources to the Nightmare faction. Then, the Nightmare faction gave the resources to the Carry faction. It was equivalent to cutting off their source of income. Although they controlled many high-quality mineral veins, the cheap labor in the outer region still occupied a large portion of the resources. Because the rewards were very little, the harvest was very big. After some discussion, even though the natives had slightly increased the exchange price, how could it compare to the normal price offered by the Nightmare faction? Therefore, the resources they exchanged were still very little. The divine tribe factions that were close to the Nightmare faction completely gave up on providing resources to the natives. All the resources they obtained were traded with the Nightmare faction. The more resources they obtained, the more superm, crystal they would get. The chances of breaking through were also greater. Therefore, they were very motivated. Seeing that this continued, all the divine tribe factions were about to break away from their control. While some of the natives were anxious, they had to think of a more radical method. This method was to kill people by force. After killing a group of people, the divine tribe factions that had broken away from their control became much more obedient. They did not dare to trade with the Nightmare faction anymore. At the same time, they sent the news to the Nightmare faction, wanting to seek help. Such situations were not rare. Therefore, Su Mengyao went to find Ziqin, who was refining the king of God's soul essence. He had not finished refining the king of God's soul essence. When Ziqin heard the news, he frowned. This matter was not just about the Nightmare faction's resources. It was about the natives' attitude toward the divine tribe. If he did not express his stance this time, then all the factions would follow suit. In this way, naturally, no divine tribe would dare to trade with him. Similarly, the Carry faction could only obtain resources from him. The divine tribe's advancement would be much slower. Which faction is it exactly? I'll go and take a look, said Ziqin. Ruger, Dawson, and some other factions were attacked. Their leaders are all dead, said Su Mengyao. The people from those factions are now outside, said Su Mengyao. I'll go with them. Chapter 3074. The people who had come to ask for help hadn't expected Ziqin, the leader of the Nightmare faction, to come in person. This made them very excited. Let's go to your factions and have a look. Ziqin looked at them and said, Let's go to the nearest faction first. The nearest faction was called Dawson, but it was still very far away. It took them half a month to get here. On the way back, Ziqin teleported with them. Their speed was extremely fast, and it took them less than a day. This wasn't a small faction, and they had more people than the Nightmare faction. When they arrived, several natives were standing in the air, shouting at the Protoss. Ziqin appeared with his people. The Dawson Protoss pointed at the natives and said, My lord, it's them! At this moment, The natives felt the fluctuations behind them. When they turned around and saw Zichen, they were stunned at first, but soon guessed Zichen's identity. Their expressions changed. "Which family are you from?" Zichen looked at the natives and asked. The few natives who were still acting high and mighty before now had fear written all over their faces, and their bodies were trembling. When the gods below caught sight of this, their expressions turned extremely agitated. The leader of the Nightmare faction had come in person. It was easy to get rid of these natives. "My lord, we are from the Meeker faction," said one of the natives in fear. Zichen nodded and said, "Go back and tell your families to prepare for war." "Huh." The native's expression changed. "We don't take the initiative to provoke others. Since you insist on fighting, then let's fight. You go back first. We'll be there soon." The natives' expressions changed, but they didn't dare say anything. They hurriedly left. In the faction below, all the Protoss cheered. "My lord, we are willing to submit to the Nightmare faction. The resources we exchange will be halved." A second-grade king flew up into the sky, came to Zichen's side, and saluted respectfully. The other Protoss looked at Zichen expectantly. As long as Zichen agreed, they believed that no natives would dare to bully them. Even if they had to lose half of their resources, they were willing to do so because they would no longer have to worry about the future. "We'll talk about this after this incident is over. If anyone in the team is good at setting up teleportation circles, we can set up a teleportation circle that leads directly to the Nightmare faction. Even if there's danger, we'll be able to get there as soon as possible," Zichen said. "Yes." This leader nodded, his expression excited. If the Nightmare faction built a teleportation array, it would be no different from relying on them. As for the construction of teleportation arrays, there were naturally such talents in the forces. Following this, Zichen went to a few other factions. The indigenous residents, they were all chased away by him, and he did not kill anyone. Aside from Meeker's faction, there were also two other factions, namely Chiu Chi and Jonah. Their forces were slightly weaker than Perry's, but they had a rank for overseeing them. After inquiring about the three factions, Zichen returned to the Nightmare faction. "Phoebe, prepare a complete map for me. Mark out the properties of Meeker's, Chiu Chi's, and Jonah's forces." Phoebe was the main contact between the Nightmare faction and the Klee family. After hearing Zichen's words, he immediately arranged for the spiritual eagle to send a message back. The head of the Klee family had already heard some rumors. After seeing Phoebe's message, he did not hesitate and immediately sent everything related to the three factions to Zichen. In the following month, the mineral veins of the three factions were all plundered by Zichen. The indigenous residents guarding the mineral veins were all killed. Such a scene caused an uproar among the indigenous residents. At this moment, Zichen appeared in the city controlled by the Meeker family. He was alone, but no one dared to underestimate him because he represented a strong army of dark heavenly ants. "Zichen, during this period of time, you have repeatedly attacked our mineral veins. What is the meaning of this?" "On the city wall," the head of the Meeker family said. "What do I mean? Don't you know?" Zichen replied coldly. "Since you insist on declaring war, then let's do it." As soon as he finished speaking, the world behind him opened up. An endless stream of dark heavenly ants rushed out and quickly entered the ground. In a short moment, the light barrier in front of the city started to tremble. Clearly, it had been attacked underground. On the city wall, the indigenous residents of the Meeker family all had a change in expression. They had never imagined that Zichen would be so decisive. "Stop! Let's talk things over," the head of the Meeker family shouted. Behind Zichen, the dark heavenly ants were still descending. They had no intention of stopping, and the light barrier was distorting even more violently. On the city wall, the head of the Meeker family turned very pale. If the Great Barrier Array was broken by these dark heavenly ants, then the Meeker family would be in danger. They might even be destroyed because of this. He cursed Zichen in his heart. However, he gritted his teeth unwillingly and said, Zichen, this is a misunderstanding. We are willing to pay a price. Moreover, we promise that we will not forcefully interfere with those factions. They can trade with whoever they want. Zichen stood there and still did not respond. His expression was cold, and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. If the battle with Perry's faction was to give himself a foothold, then this action was to make an example of him and get things done once and for all. Seeing that Zichen did not respond, the indigenous residents of the Meeker family on the city wall had a drastic change in expression. Their eyes were filled with fear. Boom! It was unknown how many dark heavenly ants were attacking the great city protecting Array. Following a loud explosion, the great city protecting Array shattered. In the next moment, there were miserable cries in the city. It was as though the world was about to be destroyed. Many dark heavenly ants entered the city of the Meeker family. The indigenous residents of the city screamed in fear. These dark heavenly ants did not launch an attack. On the city wall, the head of the Meeker family was covered in cold sweat. In that moment, he had already given up hope. Outside the city wall, Zichen said coldly, You indigenous people have oppressed the god race for so many years. You should be satisfied. I don't care if you were ordered by others or if you were truly greedy. Everything is over. If you want to obtain the resources of the god race, then trade according to the normal price. If anyone tries to force a trade, then wait for the arrival of war. After saying that, Zichen looked coldly at the head of the Meeker family. The other party waved his hand repeatedly. Then, carts of Supreme Crystal were sent out. Although Zichen did not choose to attack, he would naturally take the compensation that the other party gave. Chapter 3075. The world wasn't very big, and there were only a few publicly recognized cities. The rest were private cities. What happened in the Meeker force quickly spread to the other forces, including the royal forces in the Sky Region city. When they heard this news, they were naturally enraged. This was because Zichen was provoking all of the indigenous people. However, in the current situation, unless they united all the natives, they wouldn't be able to kill Zichen. On the other hand, if they couldn't kill Zichen in the battle, they would definitely be annihilated. Hence, although they felt that their dignity was challenged, they had no other way to deal with Zichen. Hence, they could only give up on exploiting the divine tribe. When Zichen arrived, the other two forces obediently took out their resources and apologized seriously. All of this is the doing of the Klee force. After compensating the resources and calming down Zichen's anger, the forces were unwilling to accept the loss of resources. Hence, they turned their attention to the Klee family. However, Zichen was now in an alliance with the Klee family. Hence, many forces were wary of him. Previously, the Meeker family was almost annihilated. Before the dark heavenly ants, those grand arrays did not have much effect at all. No one dared to use force against the Klee force. However, the Klee force wasn't good at fighting, but negotiation. During this period of time, there were many visitors to the Klee family. These visitors came from powerful backgrounds, and their intentions were clear. They were Jean Lee. They wanted the Klee family to give them some benefits, such as lowering the price of the resources. The Klee family's attitude towards this was naturally firm. Impossible. How long can Zichen stay in this world? How long are you going to stay? After he leaves, what else do you have to rely on? A leader of a force that was similar to the Klee force said, Brunei, you have to think clearly about the key point of this matter. Your cooperation with Zichen is only temporary, but we have been here for generations. Are you willing to go against all of us for a temporary ally? Clevenly suppressed the anger in his heart and said, Double the price is something that Zichen and I have already discussed. If I dare to accept this price, why can't you? I only collect resources from Zichen's Nightmare faction. You can use the same price to collect resources from other factions. I believe that no one will refuse. As far as I know, Zi-Chun is only buying resources at the same price. When the person heard Chris's words, his face turned ugly. Chris's forces were buying resources at twice the price because they were in an alliance with Zi-Chun. If they were to buy resources at twice the price, they would be fools. They weren't even willing to pay the same price, which was why they had come to Chris to negotiate. As long as they lowered the price, Zi-Chun's price would naturally be lowered as well. In fact, to put it bluntly, they had always been buying resources at a low price, so they felt that the resources mined by the Protoss were worth this price. They were naturally unwilling to buy at a higher price, which was why they had come to negotiate. This time, naturally, they had left on bad terms because Chris's forces would never agree to this. If they did, they would inevitably offend Zi-Chun. Moreover, those who had come to tell him about this did not have good intentions. Perhaps they would turn around and negotiate with Zi-Chun at double price. Therefore, he was not stupid. Naturally, he would not agree. It was just that he had to consider what these factions had told him. Once Zi-Chun left, Chris's forces would be targeted by other factions. At that time, what would Chris's forces do? Confused, he could only go to his family's rank 4 to resolve his doubts. The rank 4 of his family was a wise old man. He looked at Chris and heard his doubts. He said, "This is indeed a problem. It is not only something we need to consider, but also something Zi-Chun should consider. If he leaves this area, what will happen to the force he created and the god race that will follow?" Chris sat and listened. The rank 4 continued, "If he only stays here for a few hundred years, I believe it will not be enough to create an army that can fight against the experts of the major factions. However, if he stays here for more than 1,000 years, he may not be willing. But even if it is only a few hundred years, it is still a very good opportunity for us. Because if we monopolize all the opportunities created by the Protoss in this area for a few hundred years, the resources we will obtain will be a very frightening number. If we use it to cultivate our foundation, I believe we can cultivate several rank 4. At that time, we may not have the strength to invade other factions, but we will have the strength to protect ourselves." Chris nodded. Every rank 4 was a foundation. If there were more rank 4, naturally their foundation would be more. But once Zi-Chun leaves, our enemy may be all the factions. "Maybe they will join forces to deal with us," said Chris. The rank 4 old man nodded and said, "We can't rule out this possibility. However, when Zi-Chun leaves, he will already be rank 3. At this level, do you think he will feel pressured to fight against a rank 4? Chris's expression changed. He said in a hoarse voice, "What do you mean, ancestor?" The rank 4 said, "It is not what I mean, but whether or not Zi-Chun has this idea. If he wants the Protoss to develop well before he leaves, it is not impossible to carry out a great purge of all the rank 4 in this area. Exterminating all of them is not impossible." There was a look of shock in Kelly's eyes. If Zi-Chun had really done that, then the Kelly faction would have been the most powerful faction in the world. With so many rank 4 foundations, no force would dare to challenge them. At that time, they would become a royal faction in one fell swoop. Seeing Chris's excitement, the rank 4 old man said, "For us, this is also an opportunity to rise, but it could also be a disaster. Whether or not it will succeed depends on what Zi-Chun thinks. You can look for Zi-Chun about this and tell him your concerns. Of course, if he is willing to leave the dark heavenly ant behind when he leaves, then all the dangers will be easily solved. In these years, we should also try to establish good relations with some royal factions. It would be best if they are from the craftsmen or the soldiers, because there is not much conflict between them." After hearing the rank 4 old man's words, Chris was suddenly enlightened. Therefore, he went directly to the Nightmare faction to look for Zi-Chun to talk about the future of the Nightmare faction and the Chris faction. When Chris arrived at the Nightmare faction, he also brought a few dozen people with him. These people were all there to collect resources. Chapter 3076. Clevenly's arrival surprised Zi Qin greatly. He talked about the recent events and also expressed the worries in his heart. Zi Chen had never thought about the Nightmare faction's future. Furthermore, he was not sure how long he could stay here. Now he had to consider this problem. After Clevenly finished talking about this matter, he directly left. He did not come this time to get an answer, but to let Zi Chen know about this matter and then make plans in advance. Now, the Nightmare faction and Clevenly were already tied to the same worship. Su Mengyao walked into the living room and saw Zi Chen frowning. She asked in puzzlement, "What's wrong? Did other factions make a move against the Clevenly faction?" Zi Chen shook his head and said no. "Clevenly came to ask me, if we leave, what will happen to the Nightmare faction?" Su Mengyao was stunned when she heard that. Her beautiful eyes also had confusion, but it disappeared in an instant. She said, "This is indeed a problem that we need to consider. In the past, we wanted to nurture a God-King army, but now we already have the dark heavenly ants. It can be considered to have fulfilled our expectations in advance. Furthermore, to nurture a large army, it will take a very long time. However, we can't leave yet, because once we leave, the God race will once again face the situation of being suppressed." Zi Chen nodded. This was what he was worried about. But if they waited for these God race to become powerful, it would take several hundred years. Could it be that they really had to wait here for several hundred years in vain? This was a problem that troubled Zi Chen. Fortunately, they had not broken through yet at present. They did not need to deliberately care about this problem. But now that they had the God-King soul essence, breaking through was only a matter of time. The Nightmare faction became very lively recently because Zi Chen already said that those with the ability could build a teleportation array here. This way, it would be convenient to teleport back and forth for transactions. Even if there was danger, they could also come here to take refuge. Although Zi Chen did not approve of them attaching themselves to the Nightmare faction, this action was already not much different from attaching. Hence, all the factions expressed their willingness to reduce the rewards for exchanging resources. In the end, they were rejected by Zi Chen. They had already earned quite a lot, so he did not want to squeeze them dry anymore. There was strength in numbers. In just a few months, one teleportation array after another was set up outside the Nightmare faction. Although they weren't built in the Nightmare faction, with experts like Zi Chen around, there wouldn't be any problems. At the same time within the Nightmare faction, Su Mengyao had implemented a point system. Everyone's rewards could be exchanged for points, and the points could be exchanged for resources, including the slots to awaken. The time limit was 50 years. If they could awaken within 50 years, that would be for the best. If they couldn't, then it would be over. After all, there were many God Kings in the various powers. In the end, there would definitely be many people who would be able to gather enough points. When Su Mengyao showed some rules of the point system to Zi Chen nodded with satisfaction. With Su Mengyao's help, he could save a lot of trouble. After Li AI wakes up, I want to open the Awakening altar to the public. If you want a spot, you have to exchange it with the Supreme Crystal. Su Mengyao said, "That's good too." Zi Chen nodded in agreement. In the blink of an eye, 5 years had passed. In these 5 years, no natives dared to threaten or kill the divine race. Obviously, the divine race's life was much more comfortable than before, and they had obtained more resources. With the Supreme Crystal to refine, everyone's speed of breaking through became faster. The divine race's life was more comfortable, but the same couldn't be said for the natives. Without the divine race's oppression, the native speed of obtaining resources became very slow. Although the mineral veins they controlled were of high yield and high quality, they slowly offered a high price, but the so-called high price was not even 1/10 of what Zi Chen offered. Naturally, no one was willing to accept it, so they slowly increased the price until it reached the normal level. Even under such circumstances, no divine race would trade with them. They couldn't beat them, nor could they scold them. This made the natives very depressed. They could only secretly hinder them, such as driving some heavenly beasts to their forces and causing them to suffer a destructive blow. When Ziqin found out about this situation, he sent monk Zhang Haoyan and the others to kill many natives. After that, the situation disappeared. Under such circumstances, the natives who couldn't obtain resources could only raise the price again. This price had exceeded Ziqin's purchase price. Although they were unwilling for the future development of their forces, they could only do so. Just as all the natives were waiting for the divine race to come knocking on their door, they were speechless to find that there was still no divine race to trade with them. Are these guys idiots? Our purchase price is very high. They couldn't wait for the divine race's forces to come knocking on their door, so they could only go by themselves. But still, no divine race was willing to trade with them. In desperation, they could only raise the price to 1/10. It was 1/10 higher than Ziqin's purchase price. This was definitely a high price, but these natives found that the divine race still wouldn't trade with them. They would rather go to Ziqin for a lower price. In the Dawson faction, a confidant looked at the leader of the Dawson faction and said, "Sir, the natives have already raised the price to 2/10. Why don't we trade with them?" The leader of the Dawson faction said indifferently, "Do the other factions trade with them?" "I've asked around. None. There aren't even any secret trades." The subordinate said doubtfully, "Isn't this a bit abnormal?" The leader of the Dawson faction said, "There's nothing abnormal about it. Do you think that I chose not to trade with them because I'm grateful to Leader Ziqin for his help in the past? Although this is one of the reasons, it's not the main reason." The confidant asked doubtfully, "Then what's the main reason?" "Because the resources we obtained from the Nightmare faction were given to the Klee faction. This faction is currently our ally, while the other factions are our enemies. Once Leader Ziqin leaves this world, these factions will definitely attack us again. If we trade with them now, it's equivalent to cutting off our own path of retreat. It's not just me who thinks this way. The other factions think the same. Thus, no matter how much resources they offer, we can't trade with them. Moreover, the current price we're trading with the Nightmare faction is normal. We haven't suffered a loss. Since the natives couldn't obtain the resources, they could only slowly raise the price. Thus, the price went from 20 to 30 to 40 to 50%. Under these circumstances, even though some factions could see the pros and cons, they were still tempted. You're tuning in to the Thunderous YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.